All right, Mr. Chair, floor is yours.
Good morning. I'd like to welcome everybody to the December Marine Fish Advisory Commission meeting. Our monthly meeting is being held via webinar, not in person. I'm calling this meeting to order. Introductions and announcements. I'm sure Nicola will give us a great presentation as well, as will somebody more recently about our council meeting, which was held down in Newport, Rhode Island. I'm not sure who will be presenting for that. That's all I really have to add for now, and let's have a good holiday meeting here, folks.
Okay, Mr. Chair, we're going to start with a roll call attendance of the commission.
Well, you have the names, Jared.
Yep.
So
Bill Amaru.
I'm present.
Bill Doyle.
Here.
Chris McGuire.
Here.
Eric Nelson. Eric, I see you here. I'm not hearing your voice.
I'm here.
Okay, gotcha. Ray Jarvis.
Here.
Ray Kane.
here.
Shelley Edmondson.
Here.
Suki Sawyer.
Here.
From MEP, I see we have Captain Jack Chapin, Lieutenant Matt Bass, and at DMF we have Director McCannon, Deputy Directors Story Reading Bob Glenn, Kevin Created, Anna Webb, Nicola Meserve, Melanie Griffin, Kelly Whitmore, Tracy Pugh, and Bradley Morgan, and Derek Perry. I am not seeing anyone currently from the Commissioner's office. So we can proceed to the review of the agenda, Mr. Chair.
Yes, let's move along. Let's review the December 2025 business meeting agenda. Any additions or changes?
Not seeing any additions. We can move on.
We can move on. Review and approval of the November 2025 draft business meeting minutes. Any edits? And this is a roll call, right, Jared?
It will be once we have a motion, yes.
Thank you.
I'll make a motion, Ray. I'll second.
A motion by Suki and a second by Bill to accept as drafted. We'll move to a roll call. Bill Amaru.
Yes.
Bill Doyle.
Yes.
Chris McGuire.
Yes.
Eric Nelson.
Yes.
Ray Jarvis.
Yes.
Ray Kane.
Yes.
Shelley Edmondson.
Yes.
And Suki Sawyer.
Yes.
Moving along to agency updates. By the way, that motion was voted up by consensus. Thank you. Agency updates. Office of Law Enforcement Personnel. Jack or Lieutenant Bass?
Good morning, everybody. Captain Chapin here. It is hunting season for us, and actually recently the shotgun, so we have been real busy out in the field. But there have been great tracks by the coastal studies on the right whales. So we've been monitoring that and getting out and doing our patrols for the right whales. There is an entanglement out there that came up from the southern waters. I think most of you are probably familiar with. We were kind of monitoring that to see if there's any help that we could provide. I believe it kind of stayed a little bit south and kind of headed east and southeast. It's the last track I saw. As far as hires go, we still are moving forward with 7 new hires for 2026. We should be getting that started. I believe there's academy dates in end of January, February that we've got them in. So it takes about a year for a person to actually end up in the field, but that's a good thing for us, is those 7 new hires. Matt, do you have anything to add?
I do not.
Okay. Anything for me?
Any questions for the captain by commission members?
I have
Not
a
seeing
question.
any. Oh, Bill Amaru.
Yeah,
Bill, you're recognized.
Yeah, very briefly, and this is very minimal impact, I would think, on marine fisheries, but I recently heard that there's going to be a tremendously expanded deer hunt on the islands, Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket, and your agency will be involved in enforcement on those rules and regulations. How much of an impact does that have on the number of hours that you guys can spend doing your work in the marine field?
Bill, we already have officers that already assigned to each island, so they spend a lot of time on the island too, back and forth, both on Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard. So If they ask for more people, excuse me, we may provide a body or two, but that wouldn't be especially impactful to us. Especially in relation to like just shotgun season for the whole state, where everybody's just kind of looking and in the field and reacting there. So
Yeah.
I wouldn't think that would be too much of an impact for us, at least marine fisheries wise, Bill.
Okay, that's great. That's what we wanted to hear. It was
Okay.
an amazing expansion. I know the populations of deer on those islands pretty significant. But boy, when I heard what they were adding, and I'm sure Ray probably already knows this because he hunts Nantucket. Okay, maybe it'll
Yeah,
help
apparently
the town
the Lyme disease
population.
is pretty
Yeah,
bad there, and the population keeps exploding, and they can't keep up with the hunting.
yeah,
And so it's the number I believe that to reduce that impact is in the thousands, I believe,
yeah.
and I think
All
the
right.
hunting is only handling 800 to 900 at most. So,
Good.
but
All right. Thanks a lot for the info.
okay, sure. Anybody else? Okay, Mr. Chairman, back to you.
Thank you. Any other questions for law enforcement from commission members?
Not seeing any. Commissioner O'Shea is in attendance.
Oh, great. Okay, we'll move on to Department of Fish and Game. Commissioner O'Shea, you're recognized. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just have a couple updates. One is that it was a great privilege to be able to attend Cape Cod Fishermen's Alliance event with Representative Kip Diggs and celebrate the $500,000 earmark, Ray, that your organization received. It's going to do a lot for really the working waterfronts on the Cape, the research and studies, workforce development, getting people trained to join the fishing industry. It's just a lot that you can do with that. It's pretty amazing and remarkable to get that kind of an earmark in these fiscal times. So that's a real kudos to your organization and to Representative Diggs and the delegation on the Cape. So that was good to be at that event and support and celebrate that. And I know DMF works closely with your organization on these types of projects. So that was great. And then also I attended the Commercial Fisheries Commission meeting in New Bedford last Friday. It was a good agenda, and Dan can fill you in more as co-chair of that commission meeting. But felt like there's good progress made, and I'm looking forward to a report that comes out of that commission that goes to the administration and the legislature, advocating for their top priorities as a commercial fishing industry. I mean, that's one of the main purposes of that commission is to really bring and elevate attention to those issues that are important to the industry. So I thought it was actually a productive meeting. And then beyond that, happy to answer any questions relative to hunting. If there's any further follow-up there. So that's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner O'Shea. Questions for Commissioner O'Shea?
Not seeing any hands raised, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner. Have a happy holiday season. I don't know how long you'll be on this call for, but I want to wish you, along with other commission members, a happy holiday season. And I dare not say Merry Christmas because it may not be politically correct. Moving on, Division of Marine Fisheries personnel, recent meetings and events, and agency activities and projects. The floor is yours, Director McKiernan.
Thank you, Chairman Kane. I got back late last night from a two of the 3-day meeting down at the Mid-Atlantic Council where they met jointly with the ASMFC on some scup, sea bass, fluke, and bluefish issues. And Nicola, I think, is going to speak to some of that verbally toward the end of this meeting. It was a really interesting meeting because it focused almost exclusively on recreational fishing issues. And one of the very difficult issues that I'm seeing, when I say difficult, it's because we had a 2.5 or 3 hour meeting and didn't make much progress, is on this issue of sector separation and creating differential rules for hire anglers as opposed to the private anglers. So that's really a work in progress, and the commission members should kind of follow that there'll be a workshop in February to try to make some progress on that. I think as part of the February ASMFC meeting. Um,
Yes,
other
it is,
news-
Dan. Yes.
In other news, there's at least two ongoing lawsuits with my last name in the defendant's line, and there were hearings on both of those on December 2nd. There was a hearing on the Moniz case concerning the legality of the lobster vessel tracker regulation. And then on December 16th, which was 2 days ago, there was a hearing in the Paysold case, which is the case challenging the VNOTch requirement for outer Cape lobstermen. And we await, the judge's decision on those. One of the issues that the plaintiffs are raising includes animal cruelty issues, which is that's kind of a reach given that it's a conservation measure that's been embraced by the entire East Coast. But we'll see where that goes. Tom had mentioned the Commercial Fisheries Commission, and we had two meetings last Friday. We had that, and also a meeting of the Offshore Wind Working Group. Those two groups, they have a lot in common, so we like to convene them on the same day and feed them all the same lunch. And it works out pretty well. The big news that came out of that one, out of the Fisheries Working Group meeting, was Brad Schondelmeyer's presentation on the 1.2 million that in grant awards that we are issuing to 6 projects that are designed to meet the goals of that Vineyard Wind Fisheries Innovation Fund, which is to try to help fishing industry and the offshore wind industry coexist. And there's 6 really, really interesting awards that include, novel fishing gears that can be fished inside the array. There's testing whether or not you can tow within the array and work on top or tow over these, what we call these concrete mattresses that cover unexposed cables. And that has some folks uptight about the ability to fish near those. Some seafood marketing programs as well. So, I want to give Brad a lot of credit. He's done a really great job for us since he came on that job about a year ago. And he worked hard with a whole lot of staff to try to process the application. So 1.2 million was issued out of a fund that has 1.75 million. So we were a little generous. We used more than about 2/3 of the money, but there's more money coming into that fund. When as part of the agreement for that of the creation of the fund, over time, if the mitigation money from Vineyard Wind goes out slower than expected, some of the monies that have been put aside for mitigation can and will be transferred to this fund. And in addition, the fund is also going to accept similar monies from some of the other offshore wind projects, specifically from Ørsted, which is Revolution Wind and South Fork. So there's going to be more money coming into that fund, but we're really pleased we were able to get some of that money out the door. We are still working with the department and the secretary on a rec permit fee increase. We're hopeful that we can raise the fee from $10 to $15 and eventually to $20 over the next few years to try to keep that recreational fisheries program intact. The money is dedicated, into a fund, and it rolls over each year. So we're doing our best to convince the administration of the wisdom of raising that fee. We've also got a meeting tomorrow scheduled with the Mass Environmental Police leadership to talk about priorities. And when I say we, it's sort of my assistant directors, our deputy directors, and me talking to their leadership to try to set some priorities for next year. So we're really looking forward to that meeting. So I'll stop there and take any questions. We've got a lot of content in today's meeting, so I don't want to take any more time.
Questions by members for the director?
Tucky, you recognized?
Yeah, thanks, Jay. Jared, thanks, Ray. Dan, when are we going to start seeing some economic data about all this buoyless fishing that's been going on? So we've asked for it in the past, and we never see any of it. I'd like to, I'd like to see some of this preliminary stuff, at least, of what's going on in this buoyless fishing stuff.
Yeah, it's a reasonable request. That's a good question. I don't know if, hey, is Bob on?
Yeah,
Bob
I'm
Glenn?
here. Yeah, I'm here, Dan. So part of the issue with that, Suki, is that because there are so few individuals participating, it's difficult for us to disclose catch rate data and economic data without breaking confidentiality rules. And so we would need a few more individuals to participate to be able to break that down. And once, I can potentially I can look at it and see if we can get um, collated enough to address the issue of confidentiality. And certainly I'm willing to look at that with our stats program and see if we can and pull that together. But it is a little bit of a challenge given the low participation rates.
Yeah, I just think one shot picture of what's going on in the whole state would not be confidentially a problem, but we need, the industry, the guys are looking to say what's going on out there. Are these guys making money, or is this a complete farce that everybody thinks it is? I mean, it's been going on for a few years now. We gotta have a better answer than that.
So I've got my hand raised, Suki. So Bob, you're referring to the 3 or less confidentiality rule?
That's correct.
So how many people have you got participating? That you can tell, Suki, right? Is it one
Yeah,
person?
so that's correct. We had one guy participating in our state waters program, and I believe four or five in our that we gave authorization to fish on NOAA Fisheries program. An issue becomes any kind of breakdown other than maybe a global one where you add it all together, because in any given month there's probably not more than 3 fishermen fishing. But we may be able to, again, I got to talk to Anna Webb. May be able to collate it all collectively and come up with an estimate. And I'll work with Anna and report back to the commission.
So Bob, a question once again. If you can move forward with this, the presentation would be at the trade show the end of January.
If we potentially, yeah, we could report it at the trade show, and also at the next, if folks are interested, if we can do it, we can also bring it forward at the next Marine Fisheries Commission meeting.
Thank you, Bob. Suki, are you satisfied, or have you more questions, Bob?
Am I satisfied? That's a stretch. Oh, yeah, okay, we'll see how it goes. I'm just bringing it up because it seems to always fall by the wayside. It ain't the first time I brought it up. All right.
Thank you, Suki.
I'm not seeing any further questions for the director, Mr. Chair. Oh, Suki, did you have another question? Doesn't look that way.
So have we got a question or not, Jared?
No further questions
No.
for the director.
Well, thank you, Dan, for your presentation. We can move along to action items. In-season adjustment to the 2026 period 1 summer flounder trip limit.
I think Jared is going to present on this.
Thank you.
Yes, just give me a minute. I'll pull up the slides we have for this.
So part of the story here is that we amend trip limits and these quarter managed fisheries in 2 ways. We do it the normal way, which is a regulation that takes 4 or 5 or 6 months. And then we like to do things what we call like kind of in season or on a much quicker turnaround. And that's where Jared posts a public comment period. And then we come to you, as in today, and we ask because this process is outlined in our regulation. So we come to you today asking you to endorse or to approve our regulation. Our change, and those changes are then communicated to the fleet.
Yeah.
But the regulations themselves don't change.
That's correct. So this would only be in place for the 2026 period one season, which is January 1 through April 22. And the
And these
challenge
become
we face
permit
here,
conditions, Jared?
excuse me?
These become additional permit conditions in order to be enforced.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the challenge we face here is, as Nicola reported back a few months ago, that the state quota for summer flounder is increasing by 75% from 2025 to 2026 and 2027. However, our rulemaking process takes about 6 to 8 months to be completed. So we can't turn over changes to the upcoming period one season, regulatory changes in time to have those rules take effect. So, but we have this process that we use in these instances, or if quotas underutilized in season to adjust limits. We have this process to help us accommodate quota utilization. Um, so the recommendation here is to increase the trip limit for this fishery from 2,000 pounds to 4,000 pounds. A little bit of background information is under the 2,000 pound limit in the 2025 period one fishery took about 45,000 pounds of quota. That's far lower than its 150,000 pound allocation that will be in place for 2026. So if we don't change rules, we're going to use that we're going to underutilize that quota by likely about 100,000 pounds. This will provide offshore boats with additional access to the available quota during the wintertime fishery. That is exclusively in federal waters. Um, we, as part of this process, we conduct a 2 week public comment period. The public comment that we have received was, and we forwarded to the commission as part of their monthly mailing, was a lot of recreational interests expressing frustrations about inshore summer flounder fishing conditions, and looking at these inshore fishing conditions and thinking it's indicative of a poor stock status, and that but this change is supported by the stock assessment. It's driven by a 45 or 48% increase to the coastwide quota, and with that coastwide quota exceeding the exceeding a threshold of what's it 9.55 million pounds. Massachusetts gets a higher percentage share, so as a result of that, our quota is going to be increasing to about 1 million pounds for this upcoming year, which is a 75% increase rather than a 45% increase, which is what's going on coastwide. And we don't think that the inshore fisheries, the challenges facing the inshore summertime recreational fishery, is likely driven by environment and the biomass of this fish moving more to the north and the east, and possibly water quality conditions inshore than it is indicative of a broader scale stock trends. Because this is supported by the most recent, this quota increase is supported by the most recent stock assessment. So, with that in mind, we'd like to allow our commercial fishery access to this for this season, because we won't be able to get regulatory changes in place until probably late April or early May, which would result in a pretty substantial underage of the 2026 period one quota allocation. So I'll take questions from commission members. Bill Amaru?
Bill, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Jared. Very good synopsis of this issue. But I've got to admit, I'm conflicted on this. You will rarely hear me disagree with an increase of resource to the commercial fishing and recreational sectors. After so many years of sacrificing and seeing our stocks rebound in recent decades, it's difficult to not be in favor of increasing limits like we're talking about increasing here for the winter fishery. But the conflict comes from my own personal experiences, and those experiences that I observe around me from other boats and fishermen in the region. And I don't disagree with all the conclusions you just came up with about possible environmental conditions, water temperature changes, stock moving to regions of the fishery that they find the better environmental conditions, and that's to the east and north for just about everything that used to be here and is still here. But I think that this increase of 75% in 1 year, that's the basis for my disagreeing with it, is simply an amount that exceeds what I think the stock should reasonably be exposed to. I think it should have been spaced out over 2 years, not one, and that the increase should have been more gradual as well for the fishing industries. So I've already commented in a letter that I wrote directly to DM and the division. So you'll know my feelings, but I'm really I need to be more convinced by my own experiences. We did see a lot of small fish this year in the fishery I pursued. It's a commercial fishery. It takes place in Nantucket Shoals, so it's in the eastern portion. It's in waters that I think are really, really excellent for the populations to center around, and in the past they have. And they just don't seem to me to be in the numbers that this description of a 75% increase in the numbers point to. So I can't say I can't say I'm against it. I can't say I'm in favor of it either. I would be in favor of a more gradual increase over a couple of years of scientific evaluations. I think one or 2 years of survey data that went into making this up may be a little bit ahead of itself. So that's how I feel. I wonder how the rest of the commission feels on it. Thank you.
Well, Bill, just to clarify, the coastwide quota is increasing to by 45% to 12.78 million pounds. But because that quota increase brings us up over a 9.55 million pound coastwide quota, Massachusetts quota share under the FMP increases dramatically. So we get a much larger quota share when quota exceeds 9.55 million pounds. So on a coastwide basis, the quota is only increasing by 45%. But because it exceeds that threshold, we get to Massachusetts gets to capitalize on more fish, which increases our state quota up to 75.
Well, I'm obviously I'm pleased by that, because for years we were way under what we should have been allocated under the coastwide plan. So I'm happy that this is occurring. I just think that the overall fishery for the entire broad range of the fishery. Of course, I can't tell you what it's like down in New Jersey or Virginia or even further up to the Northeast, but yeah, a good explanation, and glad that we're seeing these kinds of numbers being bandied about. But I think it's a rush to increase what our landing potentials are. That's all.
Nicola, did you want to add a little bit more about the quota management program here?
Yes, I did want to add that there was likewise some concern at the council and commission level with a large a large increase in the ABC that was initially kind of authorized by the SSC. And so the council and commission did apply a buffer to that and did like hold back a bit on the commercial quota increase because of concerns about how it might promote management instability to go up so much in 1 year, and some concerns that the terminal year recruitment estimates are very influential in the stock projections and haven't always been correct. So I think it's important to note that, while the 45% is still a big increase on the coastwide level, it was less than was actually allowed from the assessment. And so there was that concern about management stability.
Thank you, Nicola, for the explanation. That was needed to be heard.
Yeah. I want to thank you too, Nicola, and I'm glad to hear it, because it doesn't. I was beginning to wonder where I'm at on this whole thing, whether I shouldn't be voicing the opinion I am, but to hear that, it makes my justification a little bit more rational. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Bill, for your comments, and thank you, Nicola.
Eric Nelson?
Yes, I tend to agree with Bill on this. The inshore fishermen, the recreational fishermen are fishing, they're not catching anything. It doesn't make sense to them. that, the quota is being increased and maybe greater commercial effort. And it just doesn't intuitively make sense. And the comments were all, as you know, dominated, they were negative in terms of the increase. And so just in terms of perception, it doesn't look very good for the people who are doing the recreational fishing and, going out trying to get a fish or two for supper. And that's all.
Thank you, Art. Ray Jarvis?
Ray, you're recognized. You have to unmute yourself.
There we go. Sorry, I think I pressed that twice. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I can agree with some of the observations as far as the, fish tending to move to the east and the north. And I have heard from plenty of anglers down my way that they feel as though fluke are struggling. But I was just curious if, some of this movement was observed in the trawl survey, or how, those observations were basically observed. And I don't disagree with Bill as far as it being kind of an aggressive increase. But hearing from Nicola there, it does kind of make sense. And I'm not against the increase. It just like to kind of err on the side of caution with things like that. But overall, I'm just curious as to whether, like, how the state has observed the movement to the north and the east, because we've seen that with a lot of different species. And I've personally seen limited large fluke down my way. We do catch plenty of small ones. There are areas though where they're very prevalent. Larger fish are very prevalent, and I think that in my own observations, this has a lot to do with water quality and conditions, environmental conditions, bait, things like that. But I think some of the traditional areas where a lot of recreational anglers fish, at least down my way, Vineyard Sound, Buzzards Bay, that these areas don't fish like they used to, and there are smaller fish. A lot of the effort is seen in the middle of the summer, I feel, for these fish, and we have increased water temperatures. So, I believe that it has more to do with environmental factors and conditions rather than the stock itself.
So Ray, at the state level, we've seen the loss of the inshore, a good portion of the inshore rod and reel fleet over the course of the past 20 years. The commercial rod and reel fleet they used to fish Lucas Shoal and Middle Ground is pretty much obsolete now. And
Mhm.
we've seen the movement of rod and reel fishing, to the eastern side of Nantucket Sound and off to Nantucket Shoals. We've also seen in some of the data an increase in landings coming from federal waters during
Okay.
the summertime period, which may be indicative of higher limits, bringing in larger boats, but it also may be indicative of shift of where the fish are. And I'd ask Nicola to weigh in on kind of the coast-wide observations, which is what was sort of driving the the change in the management plan to increase to provide quota when more quota shared when the quota was increased.
Okay. Thank you.
Nicola?
Yes, I was just trying to bring up the most recent stock assessment, but I believe that there are some figures in there that demonstrate from trawl survey data that shift, and I'd be happy to find that and send it around to commission members so that they can see that afterwards.
Thank you,
Great.
Nicola.
Dan, did you want to add to the discussion?
Yeah, I just want to point out what this proposal is. Now, it is conservative. So if you look at the slide on the screen, it talks about 150,000 pound allocation for the winter fish, until the trip limit changes. So our current rules uh, were written when the quotas were lower, and it says that when we hit 15% of the annual quota, then we go to a lower trip limit. And 15% of 1 million pounds is 150,000. So that second bullet referring to 150,000 pound allocation refers to how much we were setting aside for this winter fishing, which is still fairly low. So I believe in the next round of rulemaking, because we're concerned if the goal is to fully utilize the quota, then we want to maybe even adjust that. But today we're only voting on allowing the boats in the wintertime to land up to this 150,000 pounds. And we think they could come close to that if we change this trip limit. So I think it's still a rule that's appropriate because it is conservative. However, I would welcome if the commission wants to bring at our next meeting, maybe bring in the folks from our trawl survey and maybe even someone who's knowledgeable about the assessment, and the intricacies of the assessment. It sounds like there's a lot of interest in the actual status of the stock. So maybe we could push that to a future meeting for informational purposes. But I still hope the commission would approve this, because I think if you don't, then we're going to be way short of we're going to have a massive underage by the end of the year, and then then there's ramifications for that too. So I hope the commission would approve this as presented, but I will come back next meeting, whether it be January, February, with more conversation about this.
So Dan, by your closing comment, is that if you don't use it, you lose it?
Well, not necessarily, but it's never a good look.
Right,
to
right.
to be given quota allocations and opting to maintain super conservative rules. Because then what we might do is get pressured at the end of the year or the last quarter of the year to like open it wide open, and then,
Right.
But anyway, I appreciate the commission's concern. I think it's worthy of us spending a little bit more time on stock status. But this particular one is still pretty conservative because it's only targeting 150,000 pound total catch.
So I'm very much in favor of more information at a commission meeting. And this has been, as long as I've been on the commission, there's been other commission members questioning about flounder, and I think Ray Jarvis said it best, that there's been an ecological shift, in the ecosystem. We all know the ocean temperatures are changing, and so I, as chair, would look forward to more information for commission members, but this has to be voted on today, right? And this quota, Nicola, is only set for 26 and 27. Am I correct?
That's correct. The plan would be to have another stock assessment in 2027 that would provide the information to set specs further out than that.
So that would be a turn of the crank assessment, right?
Right.
Okay, thank you very much. Questions from commission members to DMF on this recommendation?
We got Bill Amber.
Bill, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just briefly, I'd like to end my comments by encouraging the division to bring up the information that you just referred that we need more of, Ray. And also, I want to know, is there a way to expand the potential for possession of these abundant fluke in fisheries that encounter them but are not currently allowed to keep them? And I think specifically I'm talking about the gillnet fishery in the deep water that occurs in the wintertime down on the tops of the canyons, where they're targeting monkfish and skate. And they get a bycatch of fluke. I think everybody that's ever observed one of those trips probably is aware of this. They're not allowed to keep it. I think the fishery is robust enough that we should be looking to eliminate the destruction of a resource because of regulations that prevent possession. So could that be looked into as well? I don't know how that works between
Bill,
federal
could you
and state.
explain to me what you mean by not allowed to keep them? Because I believe that if they're permitted, they can keep them.
Well, exactly. If they're not permitted, if they have a groundfish permit that may not include the federal or state possession.
So there's two challenges there. First,
Yep.
that fishery is occurring in federal waters, so there's a federal permitting question there because they would need a federal fluke permit to
But
retain.
doesn't this fishery increase that we're talking about occur in federal waters?
Correct.
Yeah.
But permitting wise, in order to take fluke in federal waters, you need a federal fluke permit. And that's something that, I mean,
Yeah,
that's
we
like
can't.
a
I
no
understand. But on the
issue.
state level, if we're just talking about what we can do to aid that. I don't know. You're answering the question partly right now that I'm asking for in a future meeting. There is a requirement.
Bill, I think it's worth looking at. I mean, if there's substantial bycatch going on among state-based commercial fishermen who have federal permits but no state permits,
Correct.
then I think it's worthy of looking at for sure.
Good. Thank you. That's all I wanted to hear.
Yeah. And,
so that would entail permitting on a state level to land, right, Dan, and sell?
Well, or allow some nominal bycatch for, I mean, we can look at it. We need to understand the degree of the catch. I mean, if it's 100 pounds, if it's nominal, maybe we could come up with a creative solution to allow unpermitted vessels a nominal amount.
That's what I'm asking
we have
for.
in other fisheries an open access limit for indirect catch.
Yep, that's what I'm asking for.
All right, thank you for bringing that up, Bill. That's been a point of contention down here on the Cape for years.
Yep.
Thank you, Jared and Dan, for addressing this, realizing it's a point of contention. So I think it would be important that the entire commission hear more about the SSC reports, federally, and from the technical committee from ASMFC. Nicola can deal with that. I think Melanie, or who is it, Kelly, who speaks on her behalf. But yeah, this fluke issue, we need more information on it, and I think you've got a body of commission members who want more information on it. So by all means, Dan, let's schedule an informational session at one of our commission meetings. Any other questions on this?
No.
If not,
Dan, anything else? I see your hand raised.
Whose hand?
Sorry,
Dan.
no, mine. It was remnant.
Thank you, Dan.
Then I'm not. So we would need a motion and a vote.
And this is a roll call vote.
Yes, it is.
So we need a motion, and I need a second to the motion, and then we have a roll call vote. Anybody willing to make the motion?
I do. Yep. Motion to approve the adjustments. Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to make a motion to vote in favor of in-season adjustment to increase period 1 trip limits from 2,000 to 4,000 pounds.
For the prescribed years, right? 26,
yes.
27. Thank you. I need a second.
I'll second it, Ray.
Thank you,
just
Shelley.
to clarify, this would be only before the 2026 year. We will be able to go to formal rulemaking to adjust the regulatory framework for 2027.
Thank you, Jared. All those in favor? This is a roll call vote, Jared.
Yeah, roll call
run
vote.
The show.
Bill Amaru?
I hope the science is correct. I vote yes.
Bill Doyle?
Yes.
Chris McGuire?
Yes.
Eric Nelson?
Yes.
Ray Jarvis?
Yes.
Shelley Edmondson?
Yes.
Suki Sawyer?
Yes.
Passes unanimously, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Jared. We can move along now to, let me pull up my agenda here. We've got another action item, recommendation to adopt regulatory framework for derelict gear removal. I know there was a public hearing the other night, and everybody who spoke in favor of it. And it was also mentioned there were a number of commission members on this call. Thank you very much for participating and listening to the public. That's the idea of these public hearings and the idea of being on the commission, that members listen to the public at these public hearings. So, Jared,
Ray, Bob Glenn's going to handle this one.
Thank you. Good morning, Bob.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Thank you for recognizing me, and thanks everyone who came to the public hearing the other night to listen. It's appreciated. I'm just going to give you a quick background here. As I've spoke on this in the past, historically, fishing gear that has been swept ashore, including any kind of derelict gear, has been under Mass General Law has been given property rights to the owner, and essentially through those rights, only allowed the owner or Mass Environmental Police to recover or molest that gear. And this law dates back to the 1940s when the scale of our fishery was much smaller. We only had maybe 50,000 traps in all the coastal waters. And the materials used to make that gear was primarily made out of wood lathe traps and organic material for the rope like jute and other materials and the mesh that were biodegradable. And so two things is that gear often survived washing to shore and still had value to the owner. And also, and if it didn't, it would biodegrade over time and making it, break down. And over the years, the scale of our fishery has increased dramatically. We now have, in Massachusetts coastal waters, just shy, around 275,000 traps that are in coastal waters. And in addition to that, since the 1990s, virtually 90% of all gear fish in state waters consist of polyvinyl coated mesh, and the ropes are made of all synthetic materials like polyester and polyvinyl, etc., that doesn't break down. And then what we found is that in general, this gear, when it washes ashore, often is destroyed or is not as serviceable anymore, and causes a real problem. And the fact that historically with the Mass General laws, folks couldn't clean it up off the beaches and out of the waters. It created a number of problems. Based on research that DMF conducted, back Jared one, sorry. Based on work that we conducted, we estimate that 9% of traps are lost a year. And this is based on surveys that were given to commercial fishermen based on that. And most of that is from losses in storm, but also boats running over gear, etc. Next slide. To address this, back in 2022, Director McKernan established a derelict gear task force. And this was kind of comprised of DMF staff, DMF legal counsel, the Mass Environmental Police, but also several industry members and the NGO community. So a broad base of folks working on this issue. And through a series of several meetings, this task force created a white paper advocating that the state law be changed, and specifically looking to differentiate fishing gear from fishing gear debris, which was not currently in the laws, and to maintain property rights for fishing gear, but not so for fishing gear debris. And finally, to authorize DMF to regulate and permit the removal, possession, and disposal of fishing gear debris. And we presented this to the Mass Legislature Coastal Caucus, and then the Coastal Caucus sponsored the statutory amendments, which were signed into law by Governor Healy in early 2025. Next slide, please. And within these changes, there were changes to some of the definition, and specifically, we created a new definition for fishing gear debris. And the first was we insert the term intact, and that's for fishing gear. That's intact means that it functions as it's intended to take, hold, or capture fish, and is maintained in the water during the open season. And that's another key element there is the phrase open season, so that gear not in the open season can be classified as fishing gear debris. And in that case, the definition is not intact, does not function as is intended to take, hold, or capture fish, or is maintained in water during a closed season. So anything left behind in the closed season with this change is now considered fishing gear debris, which really makes for much more efficient cleanup of gear left behind in closures. And that change was, as I said, made back in and 2024. Next slide. In addition to that, the other amendments to Section 31 of Chapter 130 was to amend the section to allow to maintain private property rights for fishing gear, but allow DMF to regulate the removal, possession, and disposal of fishing gear debris. And so here the changes were made where we struck out the specificity here of where it says where, pound, net, fish trap, and seine, and added fishing gear in general. And then here also it was added that notwithstanding the Division of Marine Fisheries, with the approval of the Marine Fisheries Advisory Commission and Department of Fish and Game, can promulgate regulations that may authorize or permit the removal of fishing gear debris from the waters of the Commonwealth under the jurisdiction of the Commonwealth and also adjacent shoreline. And also that fishing gear debris collected from the division authority shall not be subject to general law, Chapter 134, which are the property ownership laws that would historically apply to fishing gear. Next slide, please. And then finally, it eliminated that law change, eliminated Section 32, which is essentially would no longer affords private property rights and does not necessitate the opportunity to recover, which was a real hurdle for us. And so where we are now with this proposal is the portion where we're suggesting regulatory amendments. So go ahead, Jared. And key to this is differentiating fishing gear from debris. Under the new definition, it hinges on the term intact. And fishing gear means a trap, net, fish car, or other contrivance that is intact and functions as it's intended. And fishing gear debris is that gear that is not intact. And so with that, it's in these regulations that we're proposing, it's really important to define and differentiate what intact versus not intact means. And here what we're proposing is that intact means gear that is whole, undamaged, and functions as intended to take, hold, and capture fish. And then it has to meet this criteria. Intact commercial trap park gear to be further defined to require at least 3 of the following elements. 1, that it has a compliant surface buoy marker. 2, compliant buoy line. 3, current year trap tags. And 4, compliant ghost panel and escape fence. And so if it has 3 of these 4 elements, it's considered intact fishing gear and therefore has property rights to the owner. So, buoyed gear, etc., for the most part, if it has a trap tag and has ghost panels, still maintains is intact fishing gear and still maintains property rights to the owner. Similarly, we made a similar definition for recreational trap pot gear that's just slightly different. And instead of because recreational fishers are not required to have trap tags, the primary difference here is in number 3 is it's the identification tag, which is synthetic plate or wooden lathe in the trap that has the permits holder identification in that. Next slide, please. And then in addition to this, we're proposing kind of a framework for activities that can occur under these regulations, basically for gear cleanup and removal efforts. And then the four different circumstances that we're outlining is 1 is DMF and MEP have kind of broad authority to remove, possess, and dispose of all fishing gear debris encountered on the shore or in Massachusetts waters. And so both of those agencies can remove gear or fishing gear debris rather at any time in any season under any circumstances. And that's efficient for gear cleanups and in general cleaning up and getting rid of derelict fishing gear. Another circumstance is any person may remove, possess, or dispose of fishing gear debris that is located above the mean low tide without a permit or authorization from DMF. And historically, we've had to give authorization or have direct involvement with Mass Environmental Police with groups who are proposing this type of work. And it really puts kind of a limit on it to kind of special events. And what happens is that gear kind of builds up on beaches over time, and then eventually there's an event where someone, organization or a municipality would apply to DMF for authorization and get a partner and then host this beach cleanup. Well, now that can still happen, but in addition to that, it just as gear washes up, folks above the mean low water line, folks can remove and dispose of it. The third situation is commercial mobile gear fishers may remove, possess, and dispose of fishing gear debris incidentally encountered when lawfully fishing. And however, molestation of fishing gear remains strictly prohibited. And this was based on outreach we did with both the fixed gear and mobile gear fleets. What we really want to do is we know mobile gear fishers routinely run into derelict lobster traps when they're fishing. And instead of having to, by law, throw them back into the ocean, we want to provide the opportunity for folks to bring them in and dispose of them. And then the final criteria would be all other situations. And so what we're proposing is that DMF may permit entities to remove, possess, and dispose of fishing gear debris below mean low tide under certain circumstances that ensure the project is likely to be successful and will not impact intact fishing gear. And so this would be cases where groups or municipal or any group wants to propose removal efforts like grappling or using scuba divers or using an otter trawl to specifically target gear, etc. And this would be taken on a case-by-case basis where those organizations would have to apply for authorization to DMF. Next slide.
And did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I just wanted to add a little bit of color to what Bob just described. So just imagine February 1st when our whale closure goes in and Bob has contracted boats to go out and find gear. What we've had to do in the past is secure that gear with the help of law enforcement because it's private property. And then the gear typically was being trailered from Cape Ann to Cape Cod because that was the only secure place we had. And so by virtue of changing these rules, we be able to dispose of the gear and, gear that's been left behind in a closed area. So it's really advantageous to achieve this in order to achieve those goals.
And so for that fourth activity for groups proposing, at sea gear cleanup efforts, we would have an application that would include the following elements: where the project will be conducted, when the project will be conducted, how the gear cleanup will be, so what kind of gear is going to be used, the relative expertise of the applicants or their contractors, how the gear will be disposed of, and an operational plan for preventing gear or user group conflicts. And we feel that these elements are necessary to, one, ensure that the project is likely to be successful, and then especially that the fishing gear debris can be disposed of. We found through our efforts the hardest aspect of gear cleanup is getting rid of the gear. And so having a plan to dispose of the gear is really critical to avoid, folks abandoning a bunch of gear on a town pier or dock and getting the local municipality really upset. We also want to make sure that any of these activities avoid active fishing gear and that any other, potential conflicts with other user groups are avoided. And along these lines, any of these projects that using grappling, side scan, mobile gear, or scuba, grappling, side scan, and mobile gear to remove pots would be prioritized to occur during seasons when pot trap fishing is closed. So those types of activities are best handled when all the active gear is out of the water. Next slide. In addition to this, we want to propose kind of best cleanup practices that we'll promote. And so while it would not be mandatory to return fishing gear debris to its prior owner, we encourage this practices in instances where fishing gear debris is mostly intact, it's identifiable, has potential value, and is salvageable. Fishing gear debris should be disposed of lawfully, and instances where fishing gear debris is salvageable, it may be repurposed or resold. And then finally, there is significant need to create a network to accommodate the disposal of fishing gear debris. This includes funding gear dumpsters at ports, working municipalities to accommodate disposal, and connecting cleanup efforts with entities capable of disposing or salvaging the gear. And along those lines, we have an earmark in our budget this year for $50,000, I believe, put in by Senator Tarr to do this type of disposal work. And so we've recently put an RFP out to all the coastal towns who are interested in getting funding to support dumpsters in their ports for this exact purpose. And so that's open right now. We're hoping to have that in place and have the dumpsters out by this winter when gear is coming home. Next slide. In addition to fishing gear, the task force also worked on or considered aquaculture gear, and we met at length with municipal officials from several towns, and as well as some commercial aquaculture growers. And so essentially what we found is that aquaculture gear is not within the relevant definition of fishing gear and fishing gear debris, and therefore these laws and regulations do not apply to derelict aquaculture gear. Part of this relates to that state law provides municipality the authority to manage how shellfish aquaculture is conducted in their waters. And so there's that additional component of town management here. Most municipalities with aquaculture have existing rules governing aquaculture gear marking and site maintenance. And then essentially, we found that local constables provide kind of a critical nexus between the public and industry and can help facilitate the recovery of loss in derelict aquaculture gear. So essentially, most of our shellfish constables know the growers fairly well. And so when gear washes up, they typically know who it is and can kind of facilitate identification and cleanup fairly quickly. Another consideration here is, unlike fishing gear debris, oftentimes aquaculture debris might contain valuable product reared that has value and is owned by the aquaculturist. And so if a rack of oysters washes up in the beach, there's a lot of value there to the owner, and it's important to get that product back to them. From this, our primary conclusion, and from looking at some towns who had some very successful models, was what the real need through this proposed regulations was just to have a requirement that all aquaculture gear be sufficiently tagged and marked with information that makes the gear identifiable to a permit holder to enable municipal authorities to address recovery of derelict aquaculture gear. And as I said, most towns have this requirement. But making it a universal statewide requirement that is an element that's necessary, I think, just ensures that that this efficient cleanup working with the municipalities to the shellfish constables can happen. Next slide. And so finally, our recommendations here. We're recommending the following definitions. Intact means whole, undamaged, and functions as it's intended to take, hold, or capture fish. And this includes that commercial trap gear have 3 of the following 4 elements: a compliant surface buoy, compliant buoy line, current year's trap tag, and compliant ghost gear and escape fence. Similarly, for recreational trap that has 3 of the 4 elements. Again, here, the only thing different with commercial is that, as I said, rec traps do not need trap tags, but they do have to have an identification placard either burned into the lathe or a synthetic one. In addition, DMF was recommending that we have the authorization to remove, possess, and dispose of fishing gear debris in the following circumstances: that DMF and MEP can remove and possess, dispose any fishing gear debris, that there's no authorization needed for commercial mobile gear fishers to remove, possess, or dispose of fishing gear debris that they encounter during lawful fishing. that no authorization is needed for any person to remove, possess, or dispose of fishing gear debris that washes up above the mean high water line. And that finally, in all other circumstances, we would handle through a permanent authorization for persons wanting to remove, possess, or dispose of fishing gear below the mean low tide line, meaning any subtidal gear would be done. Removal would be done through application, and that minimally needs to describe where, when, and how the project will be conducted, the method of disposal, and the expertise of the applicant. And then lastly, for aquaculture gear, DMF regulation will reinforce municipal standards that aquaculture gear be sufficiently marked to make it identifiable to the permit holder.
Questions for Bob Glenn?
Eric Nelson.
Eric, you're recognized.
Okay. Yeah, thanks, Bob, for the very thorough presentation. I attended a public hearing, virtually, but I'm very impressed with the amount of work that's gone into this, and I give DMF and all staff involved a lot of credit because you've engaged all stakeholders, and the comments were universally in support of the effort. So, in my mind, this is kind of almost a no-brainer, but I think it's in part because of all the work you've done up front to get this all ready, and input from the various groups, and to me, good job.
Thank you, Eric. Questions for Bob Glenn from commission members or compliments?
Ray Jarvis.
Ray, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to say thanks, Bob, and everybody involved in that. I think it's a really great project, and just a good initiative to clean things up and get a lot of the derelict fishing gear out of the water, and overall just really well thought out and thorough, and kind of left no stone unturned there. And it seemed like the public comments were really in favor of it. There was one gentleman who commented at the public meeting about his recreational traps and how he sees just piles of other traps under the water when he goes to retrieve some of his own gear. And Director McKiernan made light that it was, perhaps a common dumping ground for gear. And then that gentleman expressed interest in perhaps, doing some work to clean up areas like that. So I think it engages the public as well as other organizations and entities that want to get involved in the cleanup, and overall just a really good initiative.
Thank you, Ray. Questions or comments?
Shelley Edmondson.
Shelley, you're recognized.
Thanks, Ray. I just want to echo what Eric and Ray have said. I think this is a wonderful thing, and I know we see a ton of gear that washes up around the island, and being able to be more proactive on this derelict gear, I think, is a huge benefit to all. So I just wanted to thank DMF for all the hard work that went into making this happen.
Thank you, Shelley. Questions or comments?
I'm not seeing any other hands raised, Mr. Oh, Dan?
Yeah, I just want to just say what a great job Bob and the team did on this, and also credit the Department of Fish and Game's some of the legal folks and the policy folks, because they hit the ground and got a lot of support in the legislature and among some of the NGOs, and made them aware of what we were up to and what a good solution this was. So it was one of my goals as director, but it was really executed by Bob. So I just want to give him credit, and his team, and also the cooperation of Center for Coastal Studies, Environmental Police, and of course MLA to help us get through this.
Thank you, Dan. I'd also like to compliment Bob Glenn and his staff. I know historically you'd been working on this for a number of years, if I'm not mistaken, and it's finally come to fruition. So thank you, Bob.
Thanks, Ray. Yeah, for sure. This has been a long time in the making, and we're pretty excited to have it hopefully close to the goal line here.
Well, we're going to get to the goal line. Any other comments from commission members?
Bill Amber.
Bill, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Real quickly, Bob, great job. It's good to know that we won't be breaking the law anymore when we come in with a derelict string of lost gear and put it on the dock. I didn't realize I was breaking the law all those years as I was bringing in derelict gear. I thought I was doing a favor for the environment, but I didn't realize the details that I
You were
do
doing
now.
a favor.
Yeah, all right. Thanks again.
Thank you, Bill. Can we move to a motion on this? Any other comments? If not, let's move to a motion.
We
I
have
need a
one
motion. I
comment
need
from
a
the
second.
Deputy Commissioner, Safathia. Direct, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. First of all, thank you very much and happy holidays. I wanted to thank Dan's team and Bob and everything else, but I know that Dan already mentioned the staff, the attorneys that worked very closely on this. Actually, a lot of the verbiage and things had to go back and forth. And Senator Bruce Tarr, kudos to Senator Bruce Tarr and his team and the commissioner and Noah for our team working with the legislatives to get this going. It's a long time in process and working. And this is what it shows, that all different departments, we are one. All different commissions, we are one when we work together. And the Massachusetts Lobstermen Association of guiding us of how we can do it to make sure that everyone is protected, including the whale. So thank you so much, everyone, for this. I think this is our Christmas present, or whatever you want to say, Hanukkah or holiday present. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Safathia.
We got
Any
Chris
other?
McGuire.
Chris, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, big thanks to Bob and the DMF team. I did have one question about something that Bob mentioned, which is kind of like the next step in this. So totally support this. And I think that one of the things that Bob mentioned was, one of the challenges is what to do with the traps, that are actually debris once they get to the dock. So just, curious if there's anything to be said about the next step, about how we go about, contracting for dumpsters or whatever the actual disposal side of this is, because that feels like a sort of logical next step. When you're enabling people to do the right thing, you want to, keep making it happen at the dock too.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Yeah, thanks, Chris. And I can reiterate. So, one good positive development along those lines is that we had a $50,000 earmark put in our budget and funded to by Senator Tarr this year to do exactly that, to fund disposal efforts of derelict fishing gear. And so DMF just recently put out in the last few weeks a request for proposals to all municipalities and other entities interested in sponsoring a dumpster at their local port. And then we can offer grants of up to $5,000. And we're hoping to have it spread, through 10 locations throughout the state, providing there's interest to fund dumpsters for this winter. And hopefully this is something that we'll continue to get as part of our annual budget too. So during that winter gear haul out period, two things is fishermen can dispose of older gear, but two is it provides an opportunity for during cleanup efforts to dispose of that gear. And so we're hoping that this pilot effort can be expanded on and hopefully more broadly adopted moving forward, so that there's always an opportunity to efficiently dispose of this gear.
Excellent, great. Thanks for that update, and thanks to Senator Tarr for that funding.
Yes. One question, Bob. When we talk about this grant money, that money might be applicable for this year, but 10 years down the road with the cost of living increases and whatnot. So hopefully the legislature will stay involved and up the ante, with the cost of living. So a contractor comes back and says, well, this dumpster is going to cost you $100 more this year. I hope the legislators are thinking of that. I just don't want to be locked into this $50,000 number. Thank you.
Thanks, Ray.
So any other comments before I call for a motion? I'll need a motion, a second, and then a roll call vote.
Not seeing any other comments, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Jared. Somebody willing to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve.
All Well, hold it. I have 1,000 people. Who wants to make the motion?
Go
That
ahead.
was Bill Doyle.
Bill, you're recognized.
Motion to approve is presented.
Seconded.
Chris is happy to second.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Chris. Roll call vote, Jared.
Bill Amber,
Yes.
Bill Doyle,
Yes.
Chris McGuire,
Yes.
Eric Nelson,
Yes.
Ray Jarvis,
Yes.
Shelley Edmondson,
Yes.
Suki Sawyer.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously, Mr. Chair.
Well, there's a Christmas gift. Thank you very much, Commission members. We're going to move on to the final decision on commercial striped bass permitting emergency regulations.
Yep. Ray, I can take this one.
Thank you, Director McKiernan.
So, as the commission members probably remember, in similar initiatives, when it comes to permitting, the statute doesn't include a commission role to approve or reject like we do under 17A, which you just approved about how you fish, where you fish, when you fish, how much fish you take, etc. But as a matter of good practice, I try to work very closely with all 9 of you and get consensus on initiatives pertaining to permitting, because they're so important at the end of the day of how our fisheries are managed and constructed. So I'm looking for consensus on this, if I can get it. We held a public hearing and we talked about limiting striped bass permits in the future, making it a limited entry fishery. We talked about creating a new control date, a control date that was fresher, that was, the end of this year, essentially, so that we could, if and when we want to create like a filter for future participation, it could be based on landings performance that could include this year, because we did hold a group, like an advisory group, and some of you commission members did attend that. And that was a strong sentiment from the group to try to incorporate or try to make arrangements for the people who are in the fishery now to stay in it. And so in the future, I see DMF and a committee of some kind sort of delving into how we can reduce the number of permits in this fishery. But for today, I want to enact the final rule of what we proposed, and I'm holding back on one particular item, and that is not to include the owner-operator rule that we had proposed. So we would go forward with the rules for next year's permitting, which has actually begun, and permit holders have been notified that they're only eligible to get a striped bass permit if they held one in 2024, 2025. And that means we're probably going to have no effect this year on the number of permits that we sell, because we could even up it a little bit, because there's always a little bit of turnover between those 2 years. But so that's ongoing now. And what we want to do is start communicating to the folks in the future about a control date that you'll hope that I want to enact today as a final rule. But the one issue that folks really focused on, and their comments resonated with me, is that there are so many arrangements in the striped bass commercial fishery where the person who holds the permit may be there or may not be there, but there's partnerships involved with like immediate family or best friends or brothers-in-law or cousins, and I think that that it would upset a whole lot of people's businesses or business models in this upcoming year to enact it at this time. Now, the reason we like the owner-operator rule is if someone's permit is revoked or suspended, if you don't have owner-operated rules, then it's
not hard to find for that person to find themselves back on the water, right? They could borrow somebody's permit, or they could, be a crewman on someone else's boat. And so what I think in the long run, it's the right thing to do. Maybe it gets phased in over a number of years. When we made the lobster permit, an owner operated fishery, it's my recollection that we gave folks a few years because there had been some partnerships that had been developed. And we wanted them to be able to straighten it out and decide who's going to be the permit holder going forward. So I'm happy to take questions on it. This has been sort of already well aired at previous um, business meetings of the commission. We had a public hearing on it, and I'm here to, and you can see it in the public comments that there is support for this, but that particular issue of owner operator was opposed by many, and I would like some more time to work that out. So it doesn't close the door on it, but it would be through some future rulemaking after further meetings and discussion.
Questions for the director?
Eric
Jared?
Pelton?
Eric, you recognize.
Yeah, Dan, I support this effort. I am a striper fisherman, a charter guy, and fish commercially. A lot of thought has gone into this, and I do support this action at the moment. I think we have a lot more work to do when we come to, reduce the number of permits and things like that, things we have to do in the future, but I do support this effort.
Thank you, Eric.
Thanks, Eric.
Jared?
Ray Jarvis?
Ray, you recognize. You're muted.
Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do support this as well. I did listen to a lot of the public comment, and it seems like there were some tricky situations and stuff that kind of needs to be worked out. And, I think down the line, it still is a great idea to go owner operator, but at this time, just taking a little bit more time to formulate decisions and do the right thing for these different situations that came up at the public meeting. So, thank you.
Thank you, Ray. Jared?
Not seeing any other hands raised, Mr. Chair. As Dan said, this doesn't require a vote. So if there's no other comments or questions.
I only have one thought right now. I think this is one of those more informational meetings that we might need, Dan, because this is all coming down from ASMFC about the tagging programs. So I think the public's got to understand that when you move forward with this owner operator thought that, we have to limit the numbers because DMF is going to be responsible to, or Story Reed's department is going to be responsible to issue landing tags. So if you could just talk about that for a minute, or you or Nicola.
Well, yeah, I mean, ASMFC enacted as part of the of the final outcome of the last addendum is to go with harvester tagging instead of universally. Now, most states do that now. Right now, or previously, the rule was you could either have your fish be tagged at the dealer, which we and Rhode Island were doing, or on the water. And obviously, no, I'm sorry, not just on the water, prior to landing. So the harvest is responsible for those. And what that means is you have to issue the harvesters tags. And this is not a small task. We know from our tautog fishery that we issue tags to all 220, I believe, fishery participants, and it's an activity, and it's from that takes place down here in our New Bedford office. We really don't have anybody on our North Shore that's interested in tautog or that participate in the commercial harvest, but that's only half the challenge. The second half of the challenge is getting the unused tags back. So you have to claw these things back from the people you give them to if they're unused. Clearly, it makes the catch way more accountable. So if someone in the future wants to take a striped bass home to eat, that's fine. They'll be using the tag. They'll tag that fish accordingly and we'll account for it that way. And I think we'll get a much better handle on the degree of fish that it doesn't make it to the dealers because presumably those harvesters will be using a tag in order to be legal as they unload the boat and then head home. So that's a challenge that we have. I believe the deadline is for 2029, but we wanted to see if we could get it in place by 2028. Where it works really well is in states that have IFQs, because you can give each of the persons or participants an accurate number of tags that they'll need. I am not endorsing IFQs in the least, but I'm just pointing out that those we did get some pressure from some of the other states, and there's been kind of a cynical view of Massachusetts issuing these commercial permits when 4/5 of them go unused, and there's been some suspicion, whether it's true or not, that the excessive number of commercial permits actually constitutes sort of just a way for recreational anglers to take a trophy in this case, under the recent rules where we've separated the sizes so dramatically between the slot limit and the minimum size, or the lack of maximum size for the commercial anglers. So this is something that some of our neighboring states, other than Rhode Island, of course, have felt that we should probably be adopting just for the integrity of the program. So yes, so Ray, you're right. We have to develop this program over the next couple of years, and that's going to be something we're going to be working on soon.
Thank you, Dan. So, Jared, this is not an action item. We're looking for consensus. So how do we go about that? Just a raise of hands? Those in favor of?
I think for the comments received, I think we could say we achieved that. I mean, there haven't been any objections raised.
Okay. Any objections from commission members?
Not seeing any hands raised, Mr. Chair.
Not hearing any objection. Yeah, you've got this decision.
Yeah, and thank you to the commission. And I think the key is that because we came to you early on this process, when we do propose these kinds of things, get to us early, if you think we're going down the wrong pathway, and obviously we'll try to incorporate some of your ideas into anything that we propose through this process. So I am always interested to hear from the commission members because permitting is so important to the makeup of the waterfront. So thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Okay, we can move along, or does anybody need a biological break for 5 minutes? If yes, say so.
Yes.
If not, hello?
Yeah.
Yes.
We'll
Yes.
take this 5-minute break.
5-minute break. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you, Jared. Is everybody back? Can I move along here, Jared?
Yes, please.
Okay, future public hearing proposals. First one we're going to discuss is the horseshoe crab quota management.
Dan?
Sorry, I'm here.
Okay.
I'm here. Sorry about that. Okay. There's nothing that I would rather do than not go to public hearing on horseshoe crabs next year. However, we do feel that there's need to adapt the strategy a little bit. in light of some of the comments I think the commission received back at the, I believe the September meeting, when one of the, where the licensed biomedical dealers, came to us and was suggesting a number of things, not the least of which was kind of a transfer of quota from one of the one sub quota to the other, specifically from the bait quota to the biomedical quota. Recall that we are the only state in the nation that has a biomedical quota, and we put that on as a means to sort of constrain the growth that was occurring when we went from one company to two. There is some level of mortality. We believe it can be as low as 15%. It could even be lower. We'd love to study this, and we've been developing some proposals to look at the survival of bled and release crabs. But nonetheless, what we do know is that our quota, which is currently 140,000 crabs for bait, has largely been harvested for purposes primarily for bleeding. And then those crabs are then released to the bait market. What I mean by that is we do have what we affectionately call it a rent a crab program, where the biomedical processors can use the crabs that have been harvested for bait and bleed them. And of course, those crabs would not be released back to the wild, whereas the other quota, which is currently 200,000 crabs, those crabs must all be released to the wild, and everyone involved needs to do everything they can to keep those crabs in good shape in order to ensure their survival. So and I think we've talked about this, over time, and we've talked about it with other states. And we brought to your attention our depiction of what we think the bait needs are for our whelk fisheries. And we believe that the bait needs have declined substantially from 10 to 15 years ago. And the way we're able to describe this is to ask our statistics program to summarize or tally the number of times a whelk trap has been hauled. And that is one of the parameters that we collect in our statistics project, where each commercial harvester has to list the number of traps that they pull in a day. And so when you add that up over a year, and then you compare the trend over time, what we see is about a 60% decline in the number of trap hauls. And if you consider, that the norm is for a horseshoe crab to be cut into 3 or 4 parts, it's not hard to come up with the number of trap hauls we think our industry is conducting at this time, and what our bait needs are. So we think that the 100,000 crab quota is more than enough for our in-state bait fishery. I'm sorry, in-state trap, whelk trap fishery. And so, meanwhile, we've been hearing from some of the biomedical interests that the 200,000 crab quota that we put into effect a few years ago is limiting, and they would like to have access to more crabs. And they believe, especially with their practices that have gotten better over time, that has minimal effect, even at 15%. But some of them claim that it's even less than that. So, as a compromise, we are proposing to drop the bait quota from 140,000 crabs to 100,000 crabs for 2026, and then add another 80,000 crabs to the biomedical quota, which under our regulations, we prescribe that the two biomedical processors, and that is a permit that is now in limited entry. We aren't under our rules. There wouldn't be a third company that comes in and shares that pie, but it would give each of those two companies access to 140,000 crabs. So, this we're doing this adaptively. We believe that the horseshoe crab resource is robust, and we believe it's growing. But we don't have the kind of survey that is done down in Delaware Bay, where we have as maybe as much confidence as the Delaware Bay ARM model may be generating. Because Massachusetts is a large area with Cape Cod in the middle and crabs in so many locations. But given all the available information that we have, and I think next to lobster, this is the one species that is probably the second most intensely monitored by DMF staff at this point. We believe that the resource can handle this increase so in essence, you would have 100,000 crab bait quota. All of those would be presumed to be dead, and 280,000 crab biomedical quota with some level of mortality. But on balance, I think it is conservative for horseshoe crabs, and I think it provides the biomedical firms with what they need. And finally, I think it is responsive to our understanding of the capacity of our pot fisheries and reduces the bait quota appropriately because there isn't as much of a demand. We've been talking to some of the dealers. There has been a lot of crab and frozen storage. So we think in the short term, there's going to be ample crabs available. Depending on what happens in some of the other states, there may be demand for bait crabs in other states. I'm not particularly interested in being the bait fishery for the Northeast United States, especially when among some of those states that want to conserve horseshoe crabs, as in such a fervent way. Such as New Jersey, where they allow zero harvest of bait crabs, but ironically, they don't prevent their whelk potters from using that as bait, which is kind of ironic. So I think this is a well-founded proposal with some logic. It is complicated. Like I said, I'd prefer not to be tweaking our management system, but I think we've heard from enough folks about the needs on the biomedical side, and also we've examined the reduced need from our whelk pot fishery. I think it's the right way to go. I'll take any questions.
Question for the director.
Suki.
Suki, you're recognized.
Yeah, thanks, Ray. Dan, maybe I'm misunderstanding a little bit what happened at the last meeting about the oversupply of bait crabs. How come if all the bait crabs went through the bio field, how come they weren't released back into the ocean? Why do they have to go to the freezers if the freezers don't want them?
Well, that's a good question. We got a call from one of the dealers a few years ago, and because they were buying bait crabs in June and in July when the demand for bait crabs is fairly light, but they were buying up these bait crabs because they wanted to bleed the crabs. And I had a concern that the timing of this bait crab harvest was out of phase with the demand, because we know that the whelk pot fishery and the whelk landings are much higher in the fall. And my answer to that person was, we really don't want you to release them, because what happens in October when the fishermen are then looking for the bait, it doesn't make any sense for you to have bled them, released them, because that's the bait that we put aside. So there's a lack of or there's a seasonal mismatch to some degree of what's being taken in the summertime so-called bait fishery when the bait demand is in the fall. So we're not trying to regulate that at this time relative to the seasonality of the catch. And we understand that there's always been crabs put into freezers. It's not a new thing, but when a dealer does that, they have to incur some cost, right? Because if you have to pay some freezer plant that's for the storage, if you're going to be freezing crabs in June and they're not in demand until September, October, that raises the cost. Does that help answer the question?
Yeah, I understand. Tell me about freezing bait or anything else, but the I'm just concerned about we're going to take crabs away from a free market type of thing in the bait market and give them all to two companies. I'm not sure if I agree with that. I just like to think part of the reason why the bait demand is gone down is because of COVID, and the Asian market is what buys all the conchs. And seems like there's a little uptick from what I've been told about price and everything else. There'll be more interest in people going conch fishing. Not that conch fishing has its own issues, but I just don't feel as confident about giving all the crabs away to two companies, and they basically control the market at that point. So,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure what the price is medically compared to bait or any of that's the details of it all, but I just have issues about giving all the quota to control of a couple companies. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Suki. Questions for Dan?
I do. Bill Doyle?
Bill, you're recognized.
Yes, Dan, the horseshoe crab fishing community has been relatively quiet on this. And I'm told that that's because they have limited buyers, and they don't want to speak against the biomedical buyers because they need to sell their crabs to them. But at the same time, you've got some participants in this fishery that have been at it a really long time, and they're a bit upset about having quota given to a relative newcomer of a couple of years, where some of these guys have been at it, 20, 30 years. I'm just repeating some of the doc talk that I've had.
Well,
Thank
this
you.
proposal has two components. One is to reduce the bait quota, and the other is to increase the biomedical quota. We can, when we go to final rulemaking, we can treat them separately. I mean, there is no strict, oversight. It's not like there's a federal plan or an interstate plan where our total harvest is being capped. You know what I mean? So these are caps we've created between the division and the commission. And so if, I just want to give you that relief valve that, come March, when we try to vote on this as a final rule, that we could certainly do that. We could decide that. But, the challenge there is, so many of those so-called bait crabs being bled now. So I understand the principle. I understand the logic, that of what they're objecting to, but I don't know that leaving that bait quota at the same level, if there is a glut of bait on the market, if they call me saying, can we release them? I've been trying to reserve a good number of crabs for its intended purpose, the good number of bait crabs for its intended purpose. So, you know what I mean? So right now, under the way the fishery is being managed, a biomedical harvest could bleed a bait crab and call DMF and say, well, I want to release it. So I don't know that's a good scenario.
You
Does that
good,
make
Bill?
sense, Bill? It's convoluted, Bill.
Yes, it does.
I understand the concern. I really do.
Yeah, I do too. And I just wanted to repeat because I don't think we're hearing from the fishermen because of there being two buyers. I'm wondering as we follow, the confidentiality rules for a smaller number of participants in fisheries and not releasing financial data, is there some way we can hear from the fishing community or ask someone to get involved or speak for them that's
Yeah.
neutral, just so they're heard, because I think it's important that they're heard.
So, yeah, certainly. And that's something I think we should work on over the next few months, because it won't be till March that we ask you to take a vote on this. So it's certainly something we can generate some discussion with the buyers.
Are you good, Bill?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Questions for Dan? Jared?
Bill Amaru.
Bill, you recognized.
Thank you, Jared. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I won't be voting on this when the time comes for a vote, but I do think that I have to mention a few things that I believe are important in this. First of all, I'm not only to correct Zuki, but Zuki, you mentioned twice during this discussion that all quota, you used the word all twice in describing where the crabs were going. They shouldn't all go to this or that direction. And there's going to be 100,000 crabs in the bait fishery still. That's a substantial number. And I think it will supply more than the needs of the existing bait demand. So I'm not concerned about that. In its timing of having them become available when the market demands them and not having to freeze them. You already know the cost of freezing. So I think in all respects that the division is getting ahead of something on this. And one of the things that I like about the Division of Marine Fisheries, one of the many things that sets them apart from many of the other marine regulatory bodies, is that they see the future and they act on it in a way that anticipates the needs. And this is one of those actions that I think is supportable. I don't have any problems whatsoever, and I think that the industry in my region that collects a lot of horseshoe crabs for bait in the past saw the writing on the wall when it came to what was going to be happening in the future. We have a large contingent of environmental communities on the Cape that are not happy with using any crab for bait, and I think that they'll be pleased to see this. And it's rare when you actually create a scenario where two sides of a contentious issue like horseshoe crabs can be pleased by an action. It's not all of the results that certain organizations would like to see, but I know that some of them will be pleased with the fact that more of these crabs will be returned to the water than previously. And I'm happy to say that the resources Dan already pointed out is strong and growing, and everything seems to be working well. I don't anticipate anything negative coming out of this, so I support it wholeheartedly. Thank you.
Eric Nelson.
Eric, you recognized.
Thank you. I talked to one fisherman. He gave me a call, and he expressed a couple of concerns I wanted to share. One is that we are giving more power to the two buyers, and that's a concern to them because they have more control, pricing, and so forth. And the other concern he voiced was that the quota, he acknowledged right now there's more demand for the biomedical than the bait. So the change may be appropriate, but yes, what happens in the future if the biomedical doesn't need so much for one reason or another? We're kind of locked in. The bait people need more for whatever reason, and we're able to make an adjustment, year to year, depending on conditions. So this wouldn't be kind of a permanent thing, but something could be changed or if need be in the future.
Thank you, Eric.
Yep. Ray, if I could respond.
Yes.
So yes, Eric, there unlike well, there is an interstate plan for the bait fishery, and our quota is fairly liberal. It's 360,000 crabs, and we cut that down to half of that, and then we reduced it again a couple of years ago. So we would not be prevented from making an annual change to increase the bait quotas in the future. We would just come to you, the commission, and take it out to public hearing.
You good, Eric?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you, Eric. Questions for Dan, Jared?
Not seeing any other hands, Mr. Chair.
So, Dan, my concern is this I realize trap hauls have gone down significantly over the years in the conch fishery, and we have yet to see this SMAS report. The conch fishermen approached SMAS, and I guess Kevin Stokesbury and Steve Cadron took on the assignment. And what I'm hearing, what I'm getting texts about and calls is, these conch fishermen are already thinking about a slot limit. And if that were to come to fruition, if it happens, this is all hypothetical, Dan, because we know the politicians get involved with the conch fishery. We've got a lock on the gauge right now. I think it increases in 28 once again, but we've had a 3-year freeze on it. But if there's an increase in the number of hauls, that's going to require more bait. So I like what you said to Eric, that we could come back and address it if there's a greater need for bait for the conch fishermen, because we don't know how that's all going to play out, right? But I would like you to keep that in mind, and from the way you've spoken, it sounds like you've thought about that. So thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Any other thoughts from commission members?
Not seeing any hands, Mr. Chair, if you want to move to the next item.
Yeah, okay. We're going to move on, and I believe the next item, sea scallop dredge with definition and update on potential North Shore sea scallop pilot program. I've been informed by DMF staff that there's not going to be a public hearing on this, that DMF staff is working closely with harvesters on at least the pilot program. So during this conversation, if I may finish. So
yes.
During this conversation, if that's not going to public hearing, the North Shore Sea Scallop pilot program, I'm going to recognize a harvester after, DMF presents. I'm going to allow him 2 minutes because this is not going to public hearing.
Sure.
Unlike horseshoe crab quota management, that's going to public hearing.
Yeah, and Story Reed's going to present on this.
Okay, thank you, Dan. Story?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. To clarify this first part of these two issues, so issue number 1 will go to public hearing. So these two issues were first brought to your attention at your September meeting. And this is the piece that will go to public hearing, we do intend to go to public hearing later this winter with a proposal to modify the state's maximum sea scallop dredge width from 10 feet to 10.5 feet. So this is essentially a minor technical amendment that will bring the state regulation in line with federal small dredge gear requirements. And this discrepancy was brought to us by industry members at an August meeting. And we researched it and determined that this regulatory discrepancy was unintended and does create unnecessary enforcement and compliance challenges. So we're going to move forward with this and go to public hearing later this winter. So I'll pause there to see if there's any questions on that piece first.
Questions for Story?
Not seeing any, Mr. Chair.
So essentially, Story, we're going to mirror the federal regulations?
That's right. Yep, that's right.
Yeah.
Make up that 1/2 foot so there's no confusion within the industry or enforcement.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions for Story on what's going to the public hearing?
Not seeing any, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Jared. So can we move along then to the second part of this?
Sure, we'll do.
We'll do pilot program.
Yep. So in terms of the Scallop pilot program, we've been working on this idea since that August meeting we had with industry, and it would allow coastal access permit holders access to certain areas within the North Shore Regional year-round mobile gear closure. This access would occur during the winter into spring fixed gear closure in state waters to prevent gear conflicts. We're currently working with the Bureau of Underwater Archaeology to help refine the parameters of the area. So essentially, we're asking them to point out shipwrecks and other artifacts of interest that they want dredges to stay away from. We've also been working with industry members on what areas they're most interested in getting access to. So it's been kind of a back and forth. Um, we're considering criteria for participation, including a requirement to have had state water scallop landings in recent years and requiring the installation of cellular-based vessel trackers, which some boats already have. And those vessel trackers would just help us understand better where fishing's taking place and provide some measure of accountability for the boats. So we intend to finish all that ongoing work in the next month with the idea of rolling out the program for a possible mid-February start. And then because it's a pilot program, we would use it to evaluate any potential regulatory modifications moving forward.
Story just on the tracker component, that if we do that, it would be only required, their use would be only required when participating in this program. They once they stop fishing in the program, they could opt out of that.
That's true. Exactly. It wouldn't be a requirement for all state waters mobile gear fishing for them just to be involved in this pilot.
Yeah.
And the cost of that, just for information purposes, would be roughly $500 for the tracker and 1 year of service. And several of the potential participants already have those trackers on board because they need them for their lobster fishing activities.
Thank you, Story. How many participants are on this Sea Scholar pilot program?
Well, the initial meeting we had was with a half dozen permit holders. That question that you just asked, Jared and I were talking about it the other day. It depends what we end up with for participation criteria, but we think it could be 10 or 12 participants potentially.
Thank you. Questions for Story on this pilot program?
Not seeing any questions from commission members.
I would like to
We have Suki,
recognize.
but we'll recognize Kyle once Suki goes.
I'm sorry, Suki. Suki.
Yeah, thanks, Ray. Thanks, Jared. I just raising my same concerns that I've always had about some of these programs that go into state waters. We have Maine, out of New England fishermen out of state that have coastal access permits. There's no reciprocal fisheries with any Massachusetts fishermen in other states. So I've been against any out of state fishermen coming and taking place, participating in any state waters fisheries in Massachusetts. I've voiced this in the past. That hasn't really gone anywhere, but I'm raising it again today. We have pogie fishermen from out of state that come and fish in our state waters. We have other fishermen that fish down in Vineyard Sound and Nantucket Sound for fluke and scup and everything else. Again, we can't go fishing in their states for anything. I just against out of state fishermen being able to participate in our state fisheries, and I hope none of them would be able to participate in this pilot program either. Just voicing my opinion of things. Thank you.
Thank you, Suki. Story, is it a rebuttal or can you talk about?
Well, not necessarily a rebuttal, but we've heard that obviously from Suki and others in the past, including the permit holders we met with in August relative to this. So we've raised this reciprocity issue with our DFG legal team and are still working with them on it. Dan, I don't know if there's anything you want to add, but
yeah, it's a work in progress.
Yeah.
Suki, I've heard you, and it is something that I'm trying to figure out. You know, the exclusion of non-residents sometimes is more defendable in shellfish fisheries because they're non-migratory. So I'm giving all of that a lot of thought. So your words haven't fallen on deaf ears. It's actually generated a lot of conversation internally.
Thank you, Dan. That's good for commission members to know because there's been a number of people over the years who have brought this up about non-reciprocity. Thank you. Thank you for informing of the commission members about that. So could I now allow Kyle Grant the microphone for 2 minutes?
Absolutely.
Kyle, if you're on, unmute yourself.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for the opportunity to speak here today. I just want to thank Story and Kelly, Dan, the whole team that's been working on this since August. Obviously, a great opportunity for North Shore scallopers, and I think it's going to take a bit of doing to get this off the ground, but it seems like Story and the team have done a lot of the heavy lifting already. So, obviously I support this as a scalloper out of Gloucester. I think this presents an excellent opportunity for us to shift some effort from kind of some of the other traditional areas. Fish some of the open bottom that's there that is currently open, and it's been productive, but it's an extremely tight and small area. So this opening would really give us a lot of room to spread out and work some good bottom. I think it's been well thought out that it is outside of the trap season, being in line with the seasonal closure and, effectively having it open 2 weeks after, the last day. I think it gives anybody, time that may have an issue to really get their gear out of the way so we won't have conflict. And I would just also like to say, in fishing that open bottom over the last couple of years, cod ends and ghost gear, et cetera, we run into it all the time. So I think, pertinent to the earlier conversation on this call, it's a great opportunity to get some cleanup work done there out front of Gloucester now that we have the ghost gear program effectively in place for this winter. So I could go on and on about scallops. I really appreciate the opportunity, and thank you very much for taking this consideration, and I hope you all can support this today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Kyle. And Story, like the rest of DMF staff, I'm sure you're going to take the bull by the horns on this one, and hopefully it will be frugal to, or not frugal, but beneficial to state harvesters. Thank you.
We have Bill Amaru here.
Bill, you recognize.
Thanks. Just a quick question. Story, could you put out a chartlet of the area, either if you have it now, if you don't, though, could you send it so I can get a copy? I want to see what the specific area is.
Yeah, we can. I think maybe we'll send that out because I think it's still going to change after we get feedback from the Board of Underwater Archaeology. Okay?
Yeah. Good enough. Thank you.
All right.
Any other thoughts or questions for Story on this pilot program?
Not seeing any hands raised, Mr. Chair, so we can pivot to the next item.
By all means, directed commercial scup limits in June, and there will be a public hearing on this, right?
That's correct. And I'll take this one. And I want to thank Bill Amaru for bringing this back to my attention earlier this week. We had discussed it with Bill and yourself, Mr. Chair, and in Orleans commercial fishermen late last winter. And given the timing, we're unable to get it on last year's public hearing docket, and it had fallen off my radar until Bill put it back on there earlier this week. So I appreciate the reminder. So what the request was and what our proposal for public hearing is to increase the June commercial directed hook and line and fish pot trip limit for scup from 400 pounds to 800 pounds, and to increase the number of open fishing days per week from 3 to 5, going from Sunday, Tuesdays, Thursdays to Sundays through Thursdays. So this effectively makes the June limits consistent with the May limits. And the reason why they were inconsistent prior is when we initially first started to liberalize the commercial scup fishery in response to improving stock conditions and increasing quota was that we wanted to have a little less directed fishing effort in June, because June was the time where the literature shows the scup spawn. So we wanted more restricted. We moved forward in a conservative approach back maybe 10, 15 years ago to have a little bit more restrictive trip limits in June in acknowledgement that spawning is occurring then. Um, in the years since, we've, you know, underutilized our quota significantly. We've moved the tautog fishery and the sea bass fishery and the striped bass fishery later in the year, which gives potters and hook and line fishermen less fish to access during the spring. The whelk fishery, another pot fishery that's pursued on the South Coast, has also become pretty truncated in the spring. There's less fishing activity now than there was, 10 years ago on the whelk resource in the spring. So scup provide an important fishery to these South Coast fish potters and hook and liners during that period. And these more restrictive June limits make it uneconomical for them to target scup during June. So they target it in May, then they can't target it in June, and it's no longer a non-directed fishery because everything else is closed. So the only way to target is to direct on it. The stock status remains robust. We're at 322% of the target fishing spawning stock biomass target and 50% of the fishing mortality threshold. So this would benefit the fishers, the dealers. We've spoken with several dealers over the course of the past couple of years as well, and they're interested in getting a more stable supply of scup, and that would help them build markets. So we're thinking that this would be, that this is a good request to move forward to public hearing. It's also worthwhile noting that trawlers have a 10,000 pound a week limit during this period of time. So we have liberalized the trip limits for other gear types. We just haven't for the two directed gear types. So this would provide them with additional access and to make it economical for them to target scup. So I'll take questions. I'll start with Bill Amaru.
Bill, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, Jared, I'm the one who should be thanking you, because without the effort of the Division of Marine Fisheries, we wouldn't be sitting here talking about this right now. And believe me, the number of fishermen who will be benefited by this will be really, really great. I don't know what else to say. I'm very happy that we caught it in time. A fisherman, in fact, was the one who reminded me, and then we went back and looked over our notes. At any rate, we can see that the situation on this species is one of the more positive that we've got in the Northeast. And now we'll have an opportunity for fishermen to make a few more dollars. Again, I think the Division of Marine Fisheries, one of the things that makes it stand apart is its willingness to bend over backwards to accommodate the industry members that they represent. And this is just another example of it. So my thanks to you and everyone at the division to make this possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bill. Questions for Jared on this?
Dan, did you want to follow up?
Dan?
No, I'm good. A lot of support for this. And, in our seafood marketing program, again, we've been trying to promote scup. So, it's on us to try to even out the supply. So I'm clearly looking forward to making that change.
Questions for Jared?
Not seeing any, Mr. Chair.
I have a question, Jared.
Sure.
Time frame, calendar. So how this is going to have to go to public hearing, and then it's going to have to come back. What is a recommendation for the commission to vote up? So
that's a great segue to my next slide.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
So I wanted to give the commission an update on where we are with rulemaking, because there's a lot that's been going on. So this scup proposal is going to be tucked into the so-called omnibus package, which will include the other things that you've reviewed today, as well as at prior meetings: recreational bluefish limits, commercial sea bass and summer flounder adjustments, potential horseshoe crab quota reallocation, eliminating cap sub endorsements and the sea scalp shucking endorsement, and the allowance to flip a coastal lobster permit with a federal trap allocation to a offshore lobster permit on a one-time basis. These are currently, this package suite of regulations will be undergoing executive review over the next for 6 to 8 weeks. Hoping to hold public hearings in February with the goal of having final recommendations to the commission at their March meeting and final rules in place by May 1, 2026. So, Mr. Chair, to answer your question directly, the goal is to get that. This will be in that package with the goal of having those rules changed for June 1, prior to June 1. So, then on the same time frame, I'm hopeful that the surf clam rules that we've been working on for some time now will go out to public hearing as well, and we'll come back to the commission. We had a recent meeting with the secretary and DEP on that, and we're kind of finalizing some remaining issues internally with the hopes of getting that up to the governor's office for final review in the next few weeks. So that's going to be running on a similar timeline. Then in the background, there's going to be a couple other issues that we're working on. One is a suite of issues coming out of the Mid-Atlantic and the ASMSA that Nicola is going to tackle next, I believe. So I'm not going to spend too much time on that, but that's going to likely follow our what has become the normal process for this, where these rules are developed at the federal and interstate level over the course of the winter. Then we come back to the commission in February and kind of give an overview of where these processes are and what our various options may be, with the intent of holding a potential scoping meeting with recreational fishing interests in late February or early March, and then return to the commission with a final emergency regulation in March. The timeline for this is such that we can't go through normal rulemaking, that 6 to 8 month process, and have these rules in place for May 1, because their determinations aren't, the federal and interstate processes aren't played out in sufficient time to do that. So we kind of mock or use the rulemaking, the public scoping meeting as a public hearing, so that we can be informed as to what our emergency regulation should be, since we have to use that. Then we'll also be developing striped bass proposals this winter, using both the commission's focus group on striped bass and permitting to help inform that. And those would be things on exit and entry program for new entrants, reducing access for 2027 based on a control date and some qualifying criteria. We anticipate draft regulations will go out to public hearing in the second half of this coming year on that. And then following that will be the striped bass tagging, with the goal of probably doing that in 2027 for implementation for 2028. And then the two rules that were approved today, the derelict gear rule that was approved today, will probably be finalized in late February. And same thing with the striped bass permitting regulations. So that's the timeline for rulemaking, just so folks are aware of where things are going from here. And I'll work with you to schedule commission meetings around that timeline as it becomes a little bit more clear, because I do need to sequence those winter meetings with these actions, so that we're not pushing meetings back to accommodate public hearings.
Thank you, Jared. Questions for Jared?
Dan?
Dan, you're recognized.
No, I'm sorry. It's a remnant hand.
Okay.
Remnant hand. Thank you, Dan. Well, if there's no other hands, we can move on to discussion items. And on my agenda sheet, I've got Interstate Fisheries Management Update, American Lobster Stock Assessment. Is this going to be Tracy or not?
Yes, I will make Tracy give her access to share her screen and let her present.
Good morning, Tracy. Thank you for coming on.
Yep. Hello. Thanks. Can everybody hear me okay?
Loud and clear, Tracy.
All right, great. Let me get my screen going here. And let's see, can you guys see the presentation
Yes.
or can you see my notes?
No presentation.
All right, fabulous. Okay, so I am going to give a relatively brief overview of the 2025 lobster stock assessment. This assessment was finished up in the fall. We went through the peer review process during the first week of September, and I presented it to the Lobster Management Board at the ASMFC annual meeting in October, where the board accepted it for use in management. If folks are interested in seeing that longer presentation that went to the board, it is available. That's what the link is on the screen here. But this is the shorter, sweeter version. All right, so the various components of the stock assessment. Essentially, this is a really long document with various chapters. And during this process and what's laid out in the chapters of the document, essentially, we start out with a review of the assessment history and the regulatory history. We have a lengthy chapter where we review the life history information that's available. So we look into the literature and active and ongoing studies to particularly pay attention to research on vital rates. So things that it really impact how the population changes. So things like growth, sexual maturity, and natural mortality. We also pay a fair amount of attention to new research on diet, on movement patterns, on anything new with disease, genetics, environmental impacts, among a number of other things. We have a section where we review the history, in particular the history of the catch and the effort for the data that we have available for that. And then we spend a lot of time working to identify, describe, and evaluate the various data sources that we have available to work with in the assessment. So these are primarily fall into two categories. We have the fishery dependent data, which includes the landings data, effort, and then the sea and the port sampling programs that we use to characterize sex ratio and sizes. And then we have the fishery independent data sources, which include the surveys and other monitoring programs. There's a section that we call stock indicators, or you may hear me refer to them as model-free indicators. This is a section that looks really straightforward at the survey data and evaluates trends in those pieces of data. So we call it model-free because there's no assumptions, that go into a population model around the sort of the equations and the numerics of the model working. So these are very straightforward looks at the data. And then a large component of the assessment is the population model. So with the population model, this does include what we call the base case runs, which are sort of the primary model runs. Then we do a number of sensitivity analyses or sensitivity runs. And then we also do some projections. And the projection work is done with an additional model specifically designed to work forward in time. We have a section where we evaluate the reference points and determine the stock status. And then we finish the document up with a number of research recommendations where we sort of put forth our list of what we want to see moving forward that we think will help improve future assessments. So we are still keeping with the two stocks that we defined several assessments ago. This is the combined Gulf of Maine Georges Bank stock, and which is in the sort of the darker gray up here, and then the Southern New England stock, which is in the lighter gray here. These stock definitions are based primarily on life history characteristics, so things like maturity or growth patterns, movement patterns, size structure, and then patterns in larval dispersal. Each of these stocks is assessed separately, and the focus with the assessment is to really understand how these stocks are changing over time. So our assessment is a trend-based stock assessment. We are not currently using the old biological reference points that some of you may have historically been familiar with. So things like F10%, that's not what we're using anymore. Our stock status is evaluated based on abundance and exploitation reference points. The data sources that go in, so I briefly mentioned this, but we'll give you a little bit more detail here. The primary source of abundance information is coming from these random stratified surveys designed to monitor relative abundance. And these are the time series of data coming from the various trawl surveys that are conducted by the state agencies or the Northeast Fisheries Science Center, and the ventless trap surveys that are conducted by the state agencies in cooperation with industry members. We also have a number of other monitoring surveys that we pay attention to. In particular, the early benthic phase suction sampling. So this is the one that gives us the estimates of young of year settlement. There are also a couple of larval surveys that we pay attention to, one at Seabrook in New Hampshire and one at Millstone in eastern Long Island Sound. These are long-running, small-scale but long-term time series that we keep an eye on. And then there's a couple of fixed station trawl surveys, again, smaller scale but longer time series, URI GSO, which happens in Narragansett Bay and coastal Rhode Island, and then the Millstone Power Plant, which is eastern Long Island Sound. So the idea with those smaller scale surveys, we watch those. They don't go to the model, but we do pay close attention to be sure that the trends that we're seeing in that are similar to the trends that we're seeing over a larger scale. So the fishery dependent data that we use, again, this is harvester reported landings and effort data. And then we have the sea and the port sampling programs that are conducted by the state agencies, by NOAA Fisheries, and by the Commercial Fisheries Research Foundation's study fleet. All right, so we'll take a brief look at landings here. This is landings data going back to 1982 through 2023. 2023 was the terminal year of data for this assessment. And the way that I have this broken down here is actually by substock. So we've got this dark line here is the Gulf of Maine substock. The dashed line is the Georges Bank substock. And then the gray line is the Southern New England stock. And what you can see clearly here is that most of the landings in the US are coming from the Gulf of Maine substock. In particular, the inshore areas in the Gulf of Maine dominate landings. And one of the things that we looked into with some spatial information this year was particularly looking at the different statistical areas and how landings in those stat areas have changed over time. And what really stood out was stat area 512, which is roughly mid-coast Maine, has become increasingly dominant throughout the 2000s, to the point where we were seeing more than 50% of the Gulf of Maine catch coming from that single statistical area. We've also noticed there's been some spatial shifts in the Georges Bank landings moving towards the east. So stat area 562 has sort of become more important over time in terms of the landings coming from the Georges Bank substock. And for southern New England, you can see the peak happened in the late 90s or so, and then we had the declines. Currently, the southern New England landings are at record lows. We've seen a little bit of stabilization in the inshore landings over the last few years, but we have noticed over the last decade or so that the offshore landings have been declining pretty consistently. Okay, some basics about the model. Most of the rest of the talk here, I'm going to focus on the assessment model. So the model is what's known as a statistical catch at length model. We can't age lobsters very well at all. They molt out of the hard parts, so it's not like a fish where we can get age information. So we use size for crustaceans. The model essentially is estimating population numbers within size bins by fitting to existing data, and it does this for each sex separately. It operates in quarterly time steps, and growth is a major component to how this model works. The growth essentially is controlling how the population is advancing through those size bins. So we spent a lot of time with this assessment looking at and trying to update our growth information. There's still more to do on this. There will always be more to do on growth, but we have made some improvements here. For the model, growth is only occurring for now in summer and in fall, and the transition matrix that we're using essentially describes both molt probability and increment. So is a lobster going to molt? And if it does, how big does it get when it does it? It works on 5 millimeter size bins. It is stock and sex specific. And currently we are working with growth being constant over time. That is something that we want to explore for the future. So our survey data are provided to the model at a quarterly basis. Landings data are provided for each quarter. What the landings data are doing is defining the removals for the harvestable size range. And then it is also what we use to really set the scale for the population size estimates. So, if you think about that, in order to land X number of lobsters, there had to have been at least that many there in the population to be able to land them. So it really helps us set the scale of the population estimate. The model outputs include estimates of reference abundance and exploitation, and then these are what's compared to the reference points to describe stock status. All right, so a little bit about the reference points. During the 2020 assessment, we really needed to redefine reference points in order to recognize the major changes that we've been seeing, both in the environment and in the stock itself. So as we went through that process, we decided to focus our attention on abundance in order to sort of define these regime shifts. So we ran analyses essentially to identify the major regimes in our reference abundance. With that, we also paid a fair amount of attention to a number of environmental data sets to make sure that there was sort of rationale behind why we thought that abundance would be changing. We think that environment has a really strong influence on production or productivity in both of the stocks. So we were looking at environmental time series sort of in the background, but the regimes themselves and then the reference points are defined based on our reference abundance. So what you're seeing in the graph here, this is the figure from 2020. It is just showing that there's 3 abundance regimes that were identified for the Gulf of Maine Georges Bank stock. So this lower area here, this increasing line here is the abundance. The moderate abundance here, and then the white box over here is for the high abundance. For the Southern New England stock on the bottom of the screen here, the gray area represents the high abundance regime and the white area represents the low abundance regime. We did re-examine these analyses with the 2025 assessment to look at the timing of these regime shift breakpoints, and they were consistent. So we have kept the same reference points definitions as what we used for 2020. Essentially what we have, if you look at the top graph again for the Gulf of Maine Georges Bank, there's 3 horizontal lines here. This top dotted line is what we're calling the fishery or the industry target. The middle line here, the dashed line, is the abundance limit, and the lower solid line is the abundance threshold. For Southern New England, because of the state of the stock, we really only identified that lower abundance, so the threshold is the only reference point we have identified for Southern New England. While we also have exploitation reference points identified for both stocks, there is a target and a threshold exploitation reference point. So stock status. This is the results for the 2025 assessment. So this is the reference abundance for the Gulf of Maine Georges Bank stock. And what you're seeing in this graphic here, the colors and the shapes are essentially representative of the abundance during those regimes that I just told you about, the low, the moderate, and the high. The asterisk here is essentially the status reference abundance. And as you can see here, abundance has essentially peaked around about 2018 or so, but it has declined since that time. We are currently below the target, but we are above the abundance limit. So the stock is not depleted. For exploitation, one thing to note with this graph is exploitation has actually been really very stable over time. So we zoomed way in on the y-axis here. You can see there's a relatively small range of numbers represented here. So the zoom in makes it look a lot more jagged than it actually really is. It's been pretty stable over time. So the black line, the jagged black line, is the interannual estimates of effective exploitation. The red and the blue are smoothers that we've added to this graphic to sort of help us clarify the trend. The red is just a simple running 3-year average, and the blue is a low S smoother on this. The gray shaded area is the error around that smoother. So as you can see, the dot here at the end is our exploitation estimate, and exploitation is above the threshold by a very small number. So technically speaking, overfishing is occurring in this stock. For southern New England, we saw the peak abundance happen in the late 1990s, followed by these significant declines. Abundance has unfortunately continued to decline in this stock. It is well below the threshold, so the stock is significantly depleted. And the stock assessment team noted that the southern New England stock determination has been significantly depleted in every assessment since 2006. For exploitation, southern New England, again, we are zoomed in on that x-axis a fair amount here. And we see kind of two stanzas. What happened here is that during this time period of this decline, there were a couple of gauge changes that went into place. And then we had this period of stability after those gauge changes happened. So exploitation in southern New England is currently below the target. So the dot down here at the end, overfishing is not occurring in this stock. All right, so like all models, there is uncertainty in the results and thus in the resulting stock determinations. The way that we deal with characterizing uncertainty for the lobster assessment is by using the sensitivity analyses that we run. So for the Gulf of Maine Georges Bank stock, what you're looking at on the top here is Gulf of Maine Georges Bank. And the black dashed line is essentially the base case. So that's the model result for abundance. It's very hard to see, but there is a solid gold line that tracks very closely to that dashed black line. And then the gold shading around that represents sort of the error around it. So what we've got here, we ran 21 different sensitivity runs for the Gulf of Maine Georges Bank stock. The results of these runs were all very robust to the trends. For abundance, what we're seeing is that all of the results were below the target and above the limit, which is the same as the base case results. For exploitation, of those 21 runs, 11 of them were above the threshold, indicating overfishing. So that's the same as the base case model results. 10 of those runs were in between the threshold and the target, so indicating that overfishing was not happening. For southern New England, so the graph on the bottom, we did 38 sensitivity runs. Again, all of the runs were very robust to the trends. So the change over time was very similar with all these runs. For abundance, the results all indicated that abundance was well below the threshold. For exploitation, 12 of the runs were below the target, indicating that overfishing was not happening. So that's the same as the base case model results. 20 were between the target and the threshold, and 6 were above the threshold, indicating that overfishing was happening. All right, so our summary points here. For the Gulf of Maine Georges Bank, the stock is not depleted. We are seeing some strong spatial dynamics that drove the sort of dramatic increase and then the recent decline. This has been particularly evident in eastern Maine. The stock assessment team notes that the inshore fishery is a heavily recruit-dependent fishery. Exploitation has been relatively stable over time. So again, really small changes in that exploitation estimate can trip from a favorable to an unfavorable finding really quickly, which is what we saw happen with the 2025 assessment. So exploitation, the stock assessment team feels like this is a really important thing to continue to monitor, but it may not actually be the best way to assess the impact of fishing on the stock. Essentially, the fishery is really efficient at removing the harvestable component of the stock. And like I said, just little small changes can really tweak that favorable or unfavorable finding. So the assessment team is making the recommendation to the board that the board immediately initiate a management strategy evaluation. The idea here is for clear identification of management goals and objectives be undertaken, and that would be a process that would involve industry. We also think that an MSC will allow to bring in some experts on socioeconomic issues so that we can have a better understanding of socioeconomic status and concerns. And then we think that this process will help to clarify and identify the potential management tools that will have buy-in from industry and that can prevent further declines towards biological thresholds. For southern New England, the stock is significantly depleted. Southern New England landings are at record lows. Productivity in this stock is severely compromised, and the environmental conditions continue to worsen. So it's inshore waters in southern New England are really warm. They're very warm for an extended period of time, and we think this is having a major impact on the productivity of this stock. But the assessment team sort of notes that reproductive success from the existing spawning stock biomass appears to be insufficient to sustain a stable population at current exploitation levels. Our recommendation to the management board is similar to previous ones, where we think that the best chance for stabilizing or improving abundance and reproductive capacity will involve some significant management actions. And with that, I can take any questions from the group.
Questions for Dr. Tracy Pugh from commission members?
Suki?
Suki, you're recognized.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, Tracy. I just had a couple questions about the Benthic survey and Young of the Year surveys. Are you capable of getting what the diet is of those levels at that lobster?
That's a good question, Suki. I'm not sure that anybody has done gut content analyses of lobsters of that size range, or if they have, I'm not sure how recent it's been. There has been some work on diet with larval phases. One of the things that we think has happened and sort of the big disconnect between, we had record high spawning stock biomass, but we were seeing really low settlement success. And we think that that's been a disconnect in between the lobster larvae and their food resources. So there's been a lot of attention paid to it at the larval level. I'm not sure how much at the benthic level. I can sort of dig into that and see if I can find a better answer for that.
Yeah, because you won't get a lobsterman anywhere that's been in this business for any length of time to say there's not an incredible amount of cedars around and or V notches, but it always seems to come out that somewhere after the young of the year start, being caught in traps and stuff is where the issues are. So that's why I was wondering if the diet showed anything that was maybe they're not getting the diet that they deserved or they were used to or they needed to grow robustly. And I think this is a very important area that needs to be dove into far further for sure.
Yep. Yeah, like I said, a lot of the research has really focused on the larval stages. So what we've seen for the Seabrook power plant has a long-term larval survey. And when we looked at those data, the stage 1 larvae followed the same abundance trajectory as spawning stock biomass. So as spawning stock biomass was going up and up and up, those stage 1 larvae were also going up and up and up. So those females, those eggers, were resulting in larvae. What then happened is that in between the stage 1 and the stage 4, and the stage 4 are the ones that settle to the bottom, that's where that pattern sort of like broke. So we saw the increase in the stage 1, but the stage 4 started going down. And the research that Josh up at New Hampshire Fish and Game, and then some folks associated with, I think, Bigelow, I'm sorry, I'm probably forgetting exactly who their affiliation is. There's a couple of papers in the literature now that have really looked into the patterns in the lobster larval abundance, patterns in Calanus abundance, and then the timing of when all of those different components were in the water column. So there seems to be both a timing disconnect of when the lobster larvae are there and when the Calanus food resource is there. And then there's also been declines overall in the Calanus food resource. So it seems like the disconnect is happening at the larval phases before they hit the bottom. But with all the attention that's been paid to the larvae, Suki, I totally take your point that we should probably also be paying attention to what's going on in those initial year or two on the bottom.
Yeah, I'd agree wholeheartedly, Tracy, with the Callianus part of it all. And the funny part about that, not that it's funny, but what draws the right whales to the area also. So there's a big connect between everything here. And I'm not sure how it's trending, but it certainly needs to be looked at better. Thank you for that, Tracy.
Yep.
Thank you, Suki. Questions for Tracy?
Not seeing any other hands raised, Mr. Chair.
So I have a question, Tracy. So this, as was the 2020, they were benchmark assessments. Will you be doing a turn of the crank before 2030 on the population of lobster?
Yeah, so what we're doing with lobster is we do a benchmark assessment once every 5 years or so. So there was one in 2020 and then this one now that we just finished. So the timing of the next benchmark will be roughly probably 2030. In the interim, what we've been doing is providing the board with updates, what we're calling an annual data update process. And we're pulling a couple of pieces of survey information together. So we look at the young of year data, which is the suction sampling. We look at the recruit sizes in a number of the inshore surveys, as well as the Science Center survey to look at sort of what might be coming. So those recruit sizes are the ones that are going to molt into the harvestable sizes within a year or so. So we've been providing annual data updates to the board since the 2020 assessment, and we will continue doing that. So that doesn't run the full model. Running the full model is a complicated process. The assessment itself takes about 2 years to get through the entire process. But these annual data updates, we think, are providing a really valuable resource for the board to keep an eye on changes and what might be coming.
So a follow-up question. When will the technical committee or you be able to come forward with the 2025 landings throughout Georges Bank and Gulf of Maine? When will ASMSC be informed of those landings?
So landings are usually at the spatial level, to separate them out, are usually a little bit of a delay. So for example, I just got our 2024 landings data for Massachusetts last month. In Massachusetts, it's complicated because, as you guys know, we have fishers working in both stocks and at least 4 different lobster management areas. So, and then we have a fair amount of federal permit holders. So we have to essentially get the data coming in directly to the state, but also the data that are being reported to the feds, get it all cleaned and QC'd and together before we have that available to share. Dealer data are usually available more quickly, but they don't come with the spatial resolution to really for sure separate out by stock. So in February, Ray, I will be presenting the data update that will contain the survey data through 2024. Hang on, I'm thinking as I talk here. Yeah, the survey data through 2024. The board should have all of the landings data through 2024 at this point as part of the compliance report process. Yeah, does that give you a good time sense?
Yeah. So 2025 will be reported out in the fall of 26.
Yeah, that'll be the most the most robust reporting out of the 25 landings data will happen in fall of 26.
Thank you very much. Questions for Tracy?
Bob, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, just quickly, if there are no more questions, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to recognize and thank Tracy for all of her hard work on this assessment. Tracy not only was on the team, but she was the chair of both the technical committee and the stock assessment committee. And having the pleasure of having served in that role myself 2 times, I can tell you that it's a tremendous amount of work, and Tracy did an absolute bang-up job on it. So kudos to Tracy. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Tracy. I think we should all be very appreciative of your work at DMF.
Yep, thank you. I appreciate that.
All right,
Any other questions for Tracy?
Not seeing any, we can move to the next item.
Okay, I presume Nicola is going to take this joint ASMFC Mid-Atlantic Fishery Management Council on black sea bass, scup, and summer flounder. The floor is yours, Nicola.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll provide a quick update. I don't have extensive slides. As you know, this meeting was just yesterday and the day prior, but I did want to provide a little more detail on the outcomes for recreational fluke scup and sea bass that were in the future rulemaking slide that Jared showed earlier. So the short of it is that we have outcomes for next year that include a 20% coastwide harvest liberalization for black sea bass, which is, of course, very welcome. And then we have status quo outcomes for summer flounder and scup. And this table here provides the process by which those outcomes are determined. We use something called the percent change approach that takes into consideration both the projected harvest under the current regulations and comparing that to the upcoming recreational harvest limit. And then an additional consideration of where the species biomass is in relation to its target level to come to either a status quo liberalization or reduction scenario. So we'll start with summer flounder. And I've put the species next to their applicable row on the right-hand side. But with summer flounder, we're in a situation where a recreational harvest under the status quo measures is expected to be less than the recreational harvest limit, which did increase this for this coming year. However, because summer flounder biomass is in a low biomass category, less than 90%, based on the terminal year of the assessment in 2024, we find ourselves in a not liberalizing scenario, and so it's a status quo outcome for summer flounder. And that's, the basis of this approach is that when we're not at above the target levels, we're a little bit more precautionary about liberalizing the regulations. SCUP is in a different scenario next, where the recreational harvest under status quo regulations is expected to exceed the upcoming recreational harvest limit. However, because scup biomass is in the very high category, well above its target level, no reduction is required. So those two species really give you an idea of how this approach is meant to moderate reductions or liberalizations based on stock status. I think important to note with SCUP that while we're setting measures that are expected to exceed the recreational harvest limit, there could still be, accountability measures for that down the road if the harvest ends up leading to an exceedance of the annual catch limit and fishing mortality ends up occurring, then there is a accountability measure for the recreational fishery. But as we allow it through this approach, the harvest is allowed to be larger than the recreational harvest limit. Sea bass was the more complicated of the three species. There were two separate kind of pathways within this table that sea bass took, and that was based on the confidence interval that we use around the harvest estimate. We use a modeling approach to project harvest called the recreation demand model, which importantly considers the age structure of the population in the coming years. So, what proportion of the fish do you expect to be of legal size, as well as information about angler behavior in response to different regulatory options. But as part of that modeling process, a confidence interval is also determined around the median harvest estimate. And depending on how you categorized or qualified that confidence interval for black sea bass, it was either a situation where the harvest was expected to be just below the recreational harvest limit, and then based on the very high biomass of black sea bass, it would put us in the liberalization category of a 39% liberalization. Or if the confidence interval was set another way, it meant that the RHL was, around the estimate of the expected high biomass, and regardless of the stock size, this puts you in a no liberalization category or a zero. And so there was some discomfort or lack of clarity about which these two approaches to go with, both of which were discussed by the monitoring committee and offered as options for the board and council to consider. And so the ultimate decision was to take an average of those two essentially, and rather than a 39% increase or a 0% increase, land at the middle and allow for a 20% increase. That while that's very welcome in Massachusetts, it did take some persuading of the regional administrator to be comfortable with that, as well as some other states. So I think we're satisfied with that outcome being the best that we could achieve for recreational black sea bass. Moving forward, what we're talking about here are coast-wide liberalizations. So the next steps for sea bass will be to have some additional technical committee analysis to determine how that coast-wide liberalization is divided or allocated among the regions and the states that are within the management unit. There is a addendum that was adopted some years ago that identified in coastwide liberalization scenarios, the board should strive towards reducing interregional and intra-regional disparities in the regulations. So I have some hope that we may be able to get closer to some of our regional states in terms of what the regulations allow, but those are kind of non-binding guidance in that document. But so there's still some more work to do. I expect that the board is going to reconvene in February at the ASMFC winter meeting and kind of provide the direction to the states to the proposals that they can then develop. So we will be in that situation of some kind of late breaking developments and hence the need for emergency rulemaking on black sea bass. But we would anticipate that we'll do some type of scoping to get recreational angler and for hire industry input as to how to apply whatever liberalization that we're allowed. And then once the measures are set for 2026, they're expected to remain the same for 2027 because we do 2-year specifications now for these species. The other topic that was before the joint session of the council and ASMFC was the recreational sector separation amendment, which is looking at different ways to allow for mode management, specifically different regulations for the for hire fleet to better meet the needs of the industry, and whether or not there may be additional permitting or reporting requirements necessary to support the use of that type of mode management. But we've been working on this for a while, and at this point, the plan development team and the board feel like they could use some additional guidance from the for hire industry that has been asking for this. So that was where the outcome of this meeting came to a head, was to have a workshop where for hire members would be invited to better explain what it is that they're looking for out of this amendment, how we could potentially get there, and so further develop the type of options before it comes back to the board and the council to continue to develop. So that was anticipated to be sometime early-ish next year, but we'll have to wait for more information about where and exactly when that will be held. But that's the brief update. I don't want to belabor the point, but I'm happy that we're looking at a sea bass liberalization this year. It's been since 2012 that we were able to liberalize our black sea bass regulations, so that's welcome news.
Questions for Nicola? Jared?
One moment, please. I'm not seeing any hands raised, Mr. Chair.
Nicola, I want to personally compliment you. You brought that entire table back to a sane frame of mind by proposing that motion with a 20% increase. It seemed like a lot of people at that table were lost, in the entire presentation. So thank you very much. You read the crowd, you read the commission table and the council table properly, and your motion flew. So thank you very much. You're dedicated, and I wish more commission members could have tuned in to that meeting. Thank you very much, Nicola, for getting that 20% increase on the table and across the table. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Ray.
Any other thoughts or questions for Nicola?
Not seeing any, Mr. Chair.
Okay, we can move along. Thank you, Nicola. We can move along to federal fisheries management updates. I don't know who's going to cover this today, Kelly or Melanie.
I will, Ray. Melanie.
Good morning, Melanie. Happy holidays.
You too. Happy holidays. Happy holidays, all commission members. Jared, did you get the PowerPoint I sent you?
I did. I'm
Great.
working, getting it up.
Thank you.
There you go.
All right, thanks so much. So the New England Fishery Management Council, we met, I think our chairman referred to it down in Newport. That was back at the beginning of the month, December 2nd and 4th, or through the 4th. And we approved several actions to set specifications for the coming fishing year in various fisheries and prioritize the work ahead for 2026. Yeah, go ahead, next slide. Thank you. So scallops overall, 2025 survey biomass is the lowest recorded since 1999. So that's leading to a large decrease in the overfishing limit and the acceptable biological catch in 2025 and 6. And so, or excuse me, in 26. And the landings are expected to be about 16 to 17 million pounds. So that's continuing a declining trend where we've seen annual limits decline by about 10 million pounds each year from the previous high of about 60 million pounds. And this is really being driven by declining recruitment, as well as increasing natural mortality. And that's coming from both warming bottom temperatures, but also increased predation pressure. Starfish is a big one that you'll hear folks talking about a lot lately. The bright spot is the continued growth of a large year class in Nantucket Lightship South. So that's going to be protected for additional growth. So the specifications for 2026, those are in the document Framework 40. And for the Northern Gulf of Maine, so if you're looking at this chart on the right, the green area, I'll work from north to south. So the green area up top is the Northern Gulf of Maine. And as you see on the slide, the set aside is going to be set at 437,867 pounds. And that is decreasing by about a third from last year's value of about 675,000 pounds. So again, this reduction is driven by a decline in the exploitable biomass across the Northern Gulf of Maine. Most of the biomass is in that Stellwagen Bank area, and those animals, they're primarily 8 to 9 years old, so they have limited future growth, and the majority of the fishing effort is expected to occur on Stellwagen Bank in 2026. Then in terms of the fishery that occurs on Georges Bank in the Mid-Atlantic, the big change is that there's only going to be open bottom fishing, so that uses days at sea. We're setting that to 36 days at sea. There's going to be no access area fishing. So open bottom areas are going to include closed area, what previously was closed area 1. Nantucket Lightship West is reopening, Elephant Trunk. So the areas in red that you see there are the only closures that are continuing. As I said, that Nantucket Lightship North and South, we're hoping has some good future to it. The only other thing with scallops was we finally approved the strategic plan, and the idea there is that that's going to help us set priorities over the medium term. It's a 5 to 10 year look at what we want to accomplish. So next slide. Groundfish. Overall, this has been a pretty rough, messy regulatory environment this past year. We've had emergency actions, delayed specifications, and cod stock updates. We're finally I think we're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. Framework 69, which would finally update 2025 measures for many non-cod stocks, is it's out for public comments. There's a proposed rule. Comment period ends January 7th, so hopefully that'll be in place sooner than later. And then Amendment 25, which would finally update the cod stocks, is with NIMS, so perhaps we'll see a proposed rule in the new year. And so what we have here, what the council did in in December, was approve Framework 72, which is for the next 5 years for many stocks, 2026 to 30. So this included Georges Bank Yellowtail status determination criteria updates. That was due to an updated assessment where a WAM model replaced the previous empirical approach. So we actually didn't have numerical status determination criteria before. The status is overfished, but overfishing is not occurring. We also, in Framework 72, some consistency with how we adjust recreational measures. We have had a process for a while where the council allows or gave the regional administrator authority to adjust recreational measures for Gulf of Maine cod and haddock. And so this was just to make that consistent across all cod and haddock stocks. So next slide. All right. So the bulk of Framework 72 obviously was setting specifications, referring back to the regulatory mess I was referring to. I apologize for all the different columns here, but that kind of reflects. So what we have here are under the groundfish sub-ACLs, that's the commercial fishery, and I'm showing you what currently are the sub-ACLs for 2025, and those are under the emergency action. And then what is proposed under Framework 69, so hopefully will be in place soon to update 2025, and then what was approved by the council under Framework 72 for the upcoming fishing year. And then I've also shown you here the state water subcomponent for interest. So what was approved for the shared stocks of Georges Bank cod, haddock, and yellowtail were measures for 2026. Most of the other stocks were actually approving 5-year specifications for the 2 other yellowtail stocks, the 3 winter flounder stocks, redfish, white hake, pout, and wolffish. All is recommended by the Science and Statistical Committee. And I've grouped all the stocks, like the 1, 2, 3, 4, the first 6 rows there will show you all the stocks facing a decrease in 2026. The Framework 69, the reason the Framework 69 measures have a range for some of these fish is because the council had approved basically taking away the management uncertainty buffer if the at-sea monitoring target was set at 100%. So if you look at the proposed rule that NIMS has out for Framework 69, they've acknowledged this and acknowledged that they preliminarily set the target at 100%, but that they will be making a final determination on what that target will be in the final rule, and that's going to depend on their funding. So that may result in a lower amount. If the management uncertainty buffers have to be implemented, that's why you have that lower range. And then if the management uncertainty buffers are removed, that's why you have that upper range. White hake was kind of the glaring concern this year, given the low quota available. This is in a rebuilding plan based on an F of 70%. And given that rebuilding plan and the broad geographic distribution of the stock, it's a unit stock, this has been understandably concerning for the fishery. The council had previously taken steps to try to mitigate some of those socioeconomic concerns and impacts as best it could, but being constrained by the legal rebuilding requirement. So there's really little wiggle room left for a management solution, but the council did lower, I was talking about the management uncertainty buffer being removed if the at-sea monitoring target was set at 100%. But the council actually just approved the management uncertainty buffer just for white hake being removed if the target coverage rate was at least 90%. So a little bit more flexibility there. Additionally, the council requested that the Science and Statistical Committee consider revised catch advice. They did accept the preliminary advice based on 70% FMSY, but they're asking the SSC to go back and see if they would agree with setting advice based on 75% FMSY. That means that Framework 72 will continue to be finalized by staff, but it will not be submitted to NIMS until we get that advice back from the SSC. It would be an automatic update to Framework 72. Basically, the council said they'd accept what came out of the SSC. I will say that there is concern that doing that is going to risk a delay in implementation by May 1st. Next slide. The dogfish, that's jointly managed by the council, the New England Council, and the Mid-Atlantic, both made final decisions, basically status quo limits, although with higher discard rates being considered, it's going to reduce the quota by from 9.3 to about 9.2 million pounds. So the remaining decisions by the council centered around revisions to accountability measures to help reduce the likelihood of overages resulting from basically fluctuations or imprecise estimates, and to better align the accountability measures with stock status. So a lot of this is driven by trying to reduce unnecessary economic impacts when the stock is healthy. Without getting too into the weeds, this meant that accountability measures will be which is basically a payback. It's going to be scaled to biomass. The paybacks will be calculated using an average of ACLs and catches. It wouldn't apply if the stock is in a rebuilding plan. But right now the stock is projected to be at 113% of its target biomass in 2026. Next slide. So to wrap up on the New England Council priorities, I'll say overall, the picture is that we're oversubscribed without even taking into account staff time needed for the executive order on seafood competitiveness and the Inflation Reduction Act initiatives. Discussion around restarting work to consider scallop access to the northern edge did happen, but the council ultimately did not move that forward. Perhaps something of interest is that the council will be exploring monkfish and skates individual fishing quota system, IFQ. There will be a review of the white hake rebuilding plan and reference points. Shad and river herring measures that were discussed as part of Amendment 10 scoping are part of the herring priorities. We'll be evaluating possible management approaches for cusk to help inform an Endangered Species Act listing review. And then something I know of interest to many of the folks fishing out of Gloucester is revisiting the TMGC, basically the process for apportioning those shared stocks, a biomass apportionment methodology that's used for Georges Bank, cod, haddock, and yellowtail. Next slide. All right, so this is mid-Atlantic, Atlantic mackerel. Overall, there is an increase in spawning stock biomass that's being driven by a single large year class of recruits in the terminal year of the assessment. So you can see that, I think it's a green arrow right there that'll show you that increase. But it's highly uncertain. So the MIDS Science and Statistical Committee imposed a 93% reduction in the 2024 recruitment value to help modulate that. And the approved limits that the Mid-Atlantic Council just voted on, meaning the overfishing limit and the acceptable biological catch, they're going to be based on a 51% probability of rebuilding by 2032. Um, uh, the other option, one other option would have been slightly more precautionary and set it at 60%, but the rationale from the council was that the SSC had already reduced risk, as I mentioned, and it was consistent with the MID's response to the seafood competitiveness executive order, where they had commented that they would consider alternative rebuilding approaches for mackerel that maintains at least a 50% probability of rebuilding while allowing for more fishery yield. So this means about 15,000 metric ton ABC for 26, 17,000 for 2027. This is in comparison to this year's, which is 3,200. To access the increase, the commercial limits are going to change. Right now, they're very low. It's that for limited access permit holders, it's 20,000. And then when you hit the trigger, it goes down to 10,000. For the open access, which is important for commercial jig fishery here in Massachusetts, it's 5,000, and then it gets reduced to 2,500. So those are changing. The limited access now, the highest trip limit will be 200,000, and then it would tier down to 20,000 and then ultimately to 10,000. So there's two steps. And for open access, it's going to be the highest at 20,000, then step down to 5,000, then step down to 25,000. So that's that slower tiered increase. There was an option that would have been much higher, but there was support for ensuring that the fishery would spread out throughout the year. And then in terms of the recreational limits, this will touch back to Director McKiernan's comments about split mode. The states of Maine, New Hampshire, and Mass had submitted a letter consistent with the previous discussion when the 20 fish limit was originally implemented, that they did not support split mode. Ultimately, that was not supported by the Mid-Atlantic. And so what's going to happen is there'll be a split possession limit for recreational with a 50 fish limit for for hire and a 25 fish, so a slight increase for the private anglers. Next slide. Just to wrap up, we do have a January meeting. It'll be fully virtual, the 28th to the 29th, so slightly shorter. This is the one where we really focus on recreational measures for cod and haddock. We'll have a discussion on the scallop limited access general category IFQ program review. This has been a long time coming, and then initiate a framework to revise essential fish habitat designations for several stocks. And then you can see we'll get updates on several initiatives, including the IRA and our holistic strategic plan and other things. So that is all I have, Chair.
Thank you, Melanie. Questions for Melanie?
Dan?
Yeah,
Dan, you're recognized.
I just want to follow up on Melanie's point. She had mentioned the mode split, and so the three states of Maine, New Hampshire, and Mass had signed a letter suggesting common bag limit among private anglers and for hire anglers. And the substitute motion was made by the regional administrator and strongly embraced by the Mid-Atlantic Council. So I just want to give the commission kind of a heads up that this is going to probably be one of the more debated issues in the next couple of years, especially as Nicola described the mode split or sector management workshop that the ASMFC and the Mid-Atlantic Council are trying to put together on the four species of scup, sea bass, fluke, and bluefish. So there's two trains of thought out in the among the fishery managers and among the stakeholders. One is for hire operators need more fish, because without more fish, their business models don't work. And there's others that feel that for hire anglers should be treated like private anglers in terms of their access to the resource. And I don't know how this is going to end, but on a species like mackerel, where the states really don't get a say, it passed, pretty strongly. So I think that you're going to see, some trends toward that. The mackerel differential of 25 or 50 for me is similar to that of scup. I think the general public is nobody's clamoring for extra. I'm sorry, very few private anglers are clamoring for extra scup, but some of these business models of the for hire fleet, do present opportunities to take larger quantities, so-called meat fishery. Um, I think it would be less successful in something that's highly limited, like striped bass. Where those initiatives have failed to have differential limits. But for some of these other species, there is definitely a trend among some of the managers. So it's just a heads up to the commission. Now, the council's rule or the NIMS rule to go to 50 fish for hire, as a state, we could reject that and maintain a 25 fish limit. I don't think that would be wise, especially since it could create some regulatory chaos. But nonetheless, I'm just bringing it to the attention of the commission that it's a policy issue that is going to be confronted on many species over the next few years.
Thank you, Dan. Any other questions for Melanie or thoughts or comments?
Not seeing any hands raised, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Jared. Thank you, Melanie. Moving on. Do any commission members have other business that they want discussed at future meetings?
Not seeing any hands raised, Mr. Chair.
Then we're going to go to public comment. Have you got people in the queue, Jared?
For folks in the audience, if you'd like to make a comment to the commission, please raise your hand. Mr. How much time do we want to allocate to each comment?
2 minutes.
And we'll provide 2 minutes for the public to address the commission. I have iPhone 2. Can you please identify yourself? And
Hi, Jared. Jared, Dominic Santoro. How are you?
Hi, Dominic.
Thanks, Ray. I appreciate it. I'll just take a few moments here to comment. I wanted to comment on the horseshoe crab discussion from earlier. I appreciate all the hard work DMF put in, especially with all those trap haul and figuring out the conch bait. One thing I'm not sure if they took into account was that New Bedford conch buyers buy conch from out of state, from Rhode Island, Connecticut, and they also supply them with bait. And there is no restriction to sell bait out of state. So I'd hate to see our mass conch fishermen, get pinched for bait and see the price of that go up. A couple other quick comments, and then I'll get off and let you go. Since the inception of the biomedical horseshoe crab fishery, I've had concerns and still do about the quota being transferred from public to 2 private companies. Especially with this latest proposed transfer, that would put almost 40% of the allowable quota into the hands of 2 private companies. And the latest proposal has a pretty small 2-to-1 benefit ratio. If that is going to take place, I'd like to see the possibility of a sunset clause go in on this so that in 2 or 3 years, this would be automatically reevaluated. I think it would also help to make sure that the companies are good stewards of our quota, of the people of Massachusetts horseshoe crab quota, that they're buying from enough boats that DMF sees fit and that they're paying people fairly and appropriately. So sunset quota a sunset clause, I think is something to think about here. Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Dominic. Patrick Paquette.
Yeah, thank you, Jared. Patrick Paquette. I just wanted to express some gratitude and appreciation regarding from the entire process of the derelict gear action, from the working group to Fish and Game and the legislative changes first, and now DMF's very reasonable solution. As somebody who's been a leadership in the recreational community and specifically a past president of the Mass Beach Buggy Association, it is hundreds of beach cleanups over over a couple of decades of being in an administrative role that I have had to watch both common sense frustration on the beaches regarding gear that was clearly dangerous to both wildlife and the public on some of those beaches not being able to be removed. And like what was done here today makes a real difference in both the view of the public as to what reasonable regulations are, and it sounds like made a balance that the industry is protected. And I just wanted to appreciate this was a big deal. I've had personally hundreds of conversations having to explain why some of that gear couldn't be removed from places where it obviously needed to. And this was a big deal. This should not be overlooked. And just wanted to say thank you and appreciate the good work.
Thank you, Patrick. I have SLH. Can you please identify yourself?
Hello, can you hear me?
I can, yes.
Great, thanks. This is Cheryl Heller with the Southeastern Mass Pine Barrens Alliance. Thank you for the opportunity to comment. I wanted to respond to a few points that came up in your discussion about horseshoe crabs. First, there was a suggestion that the horseshoe crab resource is robust. When we look closely at the DMF spawning survey data and walk through it with this commission, we showed that the reported increases were extremely small, in many cases amounting to less than a single additional crab per survey area and not statistically meaningful. I urge you to, again, to look closely at that data. Horseshoe crabs, as you know, take about 12 years to mature and depend on well-timed spawning to sustain their numbers. As Director McKiernan acknowledged, biomedical quotas are being set without studies on localized depletion, post-bleeding survival, or post-bleeding reproductive success. Expanding quotas without that information is not prudent. It's a gamble. We've also heard that bait harvest is now being driven by biomedical demand through the Rent-A-Crab program, even as the need for bait declines. In other words, animals are being taken simply to move quota. At the same time, we heard that the conch fishery is in serious decline because the resource is depleted. Yet that fishery is still being used to justify continued take of horseshoe crabs. Pharmaceutical companies around the world and now in the United States are moving away from the horseshoe crab-based LAL to synthetic alternatives. Instead of encouraging that transition, Massachusetts is propping up an anachronistic industry by providing a cheap supply of raw material. Horseshoe crabs are foundational to the coastal food web, yet we continue to undervalue them and their role in the coastal ecosystem and their role in supporting biodiversity. I want to reiterate that taking any species while it is spawning makes it nearly impossible to rebuild populations. If sustainability, never mind abundance, is truly the goal, protecting spawning adults must come first. Finally, I was struck by the lack of discussion about the current April 15th through June 7th closure, and I hope that at the very least, this minimal protective measure will remain in place. Thank you for allowing me to address these issues.
Jared?
Oh, Brett Hoffmeister, you're next.
Yes, thank you, Brett Hoffmeister, Associates Cape Cod. Thank you for the opportunity. I really had a couple of quick comments and one question. I'll start with a question. Dan had mentioned in the proposals uncertainty about the recapture of crabs for biomedical purposes. I'm not sure I understand that, and I wondered if you might be able to elaborate for a moment or two. Comments. I would second the sunset clause. I think that's a great idea. We've always, been concerned about unintended consequences. The balloon effect is very real. We've seen the elimination of the beach harvest result in a lot of pressure on this one particular area. Similarly, I think the proposal is a fairly big move and it warrants caution. At the same time, I would contest the 2-to-1 ratio and suggest to the state that perhaps they put a range of options available when it comes time for public comment, as we've seen in other proposals. that there's often two or three or more options to choose from. I think there's some benefit to that. We don't want to distance the bait market and the businesses that support that, nor do we want to impede, the LAL production, which is very important for public health. And for whatever it's worth, synthetics that are available to the market right now are offered by all four biomedical companies. We're all trying to sell them, but the reality of the situation is it's going to take years for the regulatory landscape to catch up to the technology that we're offering. So anybody that's telling you that horseshoe crabs can be replaced, in the short term, I can tell you right now, do not know what they're talking about. Synthetics are going to take some time. So it's imperative that horseshoe crabs remain available to the LAL operations because it is a public concern, not only domestically, but internationally. That's all. Thank you very much.
Bob, did you want to comment on recapture? Bob or Dan?
Well, I will. We know that that Brett, your firm and the other firm, both label the blood crabs with a waterproof paint, and so we will work with you to sort of monitor this going forward. As if we don't see any rise in the recapture rates, then I think we know we're on safe ground in terms of liberalizing the biomedical quota, since especially those biomedical crabs that are coming out of Nantucket Sound. But that'll be an important indicator for us, in the future. But we don't have any data at this point, I don't believe, suggesting that we're on the edge of high recapture rates. I mean, obviously, if we have a high recapture rate, it suggests that we're bleeding a higher and higher percentage of those crabs. But that will be the sort of the key parameter for us to watch to make sure that what we're doing is sustainable.
Bill Michon, you can unmute yourself. You're recognized.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you. Wanted to hit on a few things really quick. I do hear from different people when I want everybody to know I'm a Massachusetts inshore dragoman. I participate in the horseshoe crab fishery along with other fisheries. And for the people that are concerned, such as from the Pine Barrens and different stuff, I've got over 40 years experience dragging in Mass state waters, and we're seeing more and more horseshoe crab. And it doesn't matter if I'm in Cape Cod Bay, east of Boston, I'm on the backside of the Cape, I'm off in Nantucket, the Vineyard. We're seeing more horseshoe crab, and the trawl surveys are showing that also, more horseshoe crab. We need to recognize there will be great benefits coming with the elimination, pretty much the elimination of the beach harvest during those spawning times. There's going to be great benefits there. I've heard mortality in the dragger fishery harvesting horseshoe crabs up to 50%. And it's not true. We've had biologists on the boat the last 4 years. We have not had a dead crab, zero mortality in 4 years. Now, and mortality is almost at zero from these crabs that go from the decks of our boat and they're trucked to the lab, and then they're released, they're dispersed back into the water. And it's just hovering just above zero. Call it 1 if you want. So there's a lot of hysteria created when people make up numbers such as 50%. And it's disappointing because I think we all care about the horseshoe crab, but they shouldn't be exploiting people like this to get them aboard for their movement. As far as the recapture, the labs do mark every crab that gets returned to the water. And where these marks last, we see them on a crab. In 2025, we saw marks from 2024. And then it comes into the 25 fishery, and they put a different design on so we can tell 1 year from the next. And we know the recapture, it's very low, maybe 1%, 0.5% per day we're seeing So that was my part on the horseshoe crab, but I also wanted to congratulate all the efforts on the derelict gear issue, because there is gear out there, from old fishing nets to things thrown off of ships to lobster traps. So to get it out of the water is wonderful. We had put a proposal in. I participated in a proposal to have mass inshore draggers. We would use our nets to collect this gear and get it out of the ocean. I'd like DMF to try to put some effort into perhaps get some funding so that we can have some help to get the bottom cleaned up. And that's it on derelict gear. The last part is fluke. I'd like to. What happened this year is we didn't catch very well in Vineyard Nantucket Sound, and then finally to make sure to see the total allowable catch to come in, a lot came in from federal waters, and then the fisheries shut down. We continued to fish up in Cape Cod Bay. We had a bycatch of fluke anywhere from 30 to 75 pounds a day, but unable to land them. And if at some point in the next few months or next year, DMF can work it in that maybe a little bit gets held back for the bycatch fishery, that would be very helpful to the mass inshore draggers. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Jared?
Ed Barrett, you're next. You can unmute yourself, Ed. Still muted, Ed? Mr. Chair, I have Bill Amaru with. Oh, there you are, Ed.
All right. Okay. Here we go. I haven't had an update on the SMAS video trial survey that was supposed to happen in January. I was kind of hoping that DMF, I know I discussed this last Friday at the Commercial Fisheries Commission. Once again, it's an extremely important trial survey, and it needs to happen in January, and the clock is ticking. So I'm hoping that any influence DMF might have on that issue, that they can bring it forth so we can get this thing done. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Dan, did you want to speak to the status of that funding?
Yeah, we notified SMAST about a month ago that we can release the same appropriation amount as last year, and we're just waiting for them to develop their spending plans, and so it's really in their court.
Mr. Chair, you have Bill Amaru with his hand raised.
Bill, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry that I had come in late like this, but for some reason my Zoom connection failed during the time when you were asking if we had anything further to add. I would just say that, and I'll contact by email the division on this, that I'd like to bring up a discussion on knobby whelk in the near future. It's been mentioned to me by local fishermen here that needs to have some discussion. So I'll bring up the points in an email and send them off, and maybe we can schedule it down the road.
Thank you, Bill.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you, Bill. All right, Mr.
Anybody
Chair.
else out in the public, Jared?
Not seeing any comments from the public or the commission. We can move for a motion to adjourn.
I'd like to wish all commission members and DMF staff a happy holiday season. Need a motion to adjourn.
I'll make the motion, Ray.
I'll second.
Kelly.
Bill
Seconded
Amaru with
by
the second.
Bill Doyle. Thank you, Bill. This meeting is now adjourned.